All right, welcome this morning to Board of County Commissioners meeting. It's good to have you here. As always, we'd like to start with a pledge and then a prayer, and we're looking for individuals who would be willing to volunteer. The prayer, it'll be a prayer, a reading, or a thought, if you have any of those. So any volunteers that would like to participate with us this morning? Seeing none.
Will read us in the pledge.
Pledge. Commissioner, are you good for a prayer?
I did prayer last time, but that's fine. I'll do it again.
Okay. Go that route then.
Our dear kind Heavenly Father, we are indeed grateful for the opportunity we have to meet together as elected people, elected leaders of Utah County. We're so thankful for thee and all thy blessings. We are thankful for the opportunity we've had to celebrate and remember those who have sacrificed for our freedoms and continue every day to show our appreciation to thee and their loved ones for their sacrifice. And we're indeed also grateful for the sacrifice of those men and women who continue to protect our freedoms each day and ongoing. Bless them and their families. We ask you to please have thy spirit be with us, that we may have thy spirit of understanding and civility, that we will listen to those that we serve and do thy will and do their will. These things we pray for in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
And
Please rise and join me in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
okay, just for housekeeping purposes. That was it. Got my tongue twisted there. We will go through our agenda, consent agenda, and regular agenda. If at any time on the agenda item that we were discussing, if you'd like to make a comment, a public comment, please come up to the front and you can state your name, and then we'll have public comment there. And then if there's general public comment at the end of the meeting, other than what's on the agenda item, if you'd hold it till that point, and then you're more than welcome to come up and have public comment at the end. So with that, we're gonna do the public hearing first, and then we'll build our agenda. So we're gonna start with our public hearing, and it's to discuss, amend, and increase the 2017 Utah County budget and the general fund and various other budgetary funds. And so right now, we'd like to open up this public hearing and maybe give Brian a chance to speak to it for a little bit, and then we'll open up to any public comment.
And by the way, I noticed that the schedule has been updated, so you can pull up the latest on that. As you know, we've gone through the process over the past couple months to change our HRIS system. And with that came an additional need for funds, and that's the primary reason for opening the budget today. And your schedule that you have before you reflects the additional funds that will be needed to do that. It's in the range of approximately $800,000 for this year. In addition to that, we also, just in the last week and a half, have had a U.S. Congressman submit a resignation effective the end of this month, which means we have to hold an upcoming election. We are able to do that for the most part in conjunction with our municipal elections, which the county had already contracted with 21 of the 24 cities to go ahead and hold this year. And so for those in the 3rd Congressional District, which are on the east side of I-15 approximately, we should be fine. Although if any of those cities do not have a municipal primary on August 15th, it will be totally our responsibility to go ahead and cover the funds in those particular cities, or fund that election, because we won't be able to piggyback with the cities. It's really up in the air as to if we will see any reimbursement from the state. It's something that we really can't plan on. If we do get something, that will be a bonus.
Although we did try and plan on it, we did set aside a little bit.
Yeah, we did set aside a little bit, but I've gone ahead and I've had Deneen and Scott go ahead and run some numbers of a worst-case scenario, and that is the additional 500,000 that we're gonna need to cover that. So that is the majority of what we have put in the schedule. I know that there are other needs and concerns that are there for accounting purposes, and that it is our recommendation that we go ahead and carry forward a couple items, and these are items that were addressed in the 2016 budget, but they didn't come to fruition, and they are now coming to fruition in 2016. One of those is the Provo City Virtua payment. In addition, we also have the Fusion Splicer that we recommend be carried forward. And also we are recommending that there be additional budget funds added to the budget to cover the fiber optic to the new 4th District Court building. I know that there was a request from Public Works to just take that possibly out of capital projects, but since we're doing the budget opening, we can take it out of the telecommunications fund. So that, in a nutshell, is the schedule you have before you. Those three carry forward items, the election and the HRIS.
So what I have is, the one with Provo City is about $13,000.
Mhm.
The elections is $500,000. Public Works with the fiber optics is $20,000. And then the Fusion Splicer is $9,000.
Mhm.
All for discussion later on as we look down through it.
Mhm.
Okay. And then, of course, then we have,
100,000 something.
yeah, there's close to, well, there's close to $1 million, but it depends, because we have to go back and forth with money that was already in there. It was already $250,000 that was in there. We're talking about for the HRIS system.
Mhm.
So that's what we're talking about in the way of opening up the budget for now.
That's correct.
Yeah.
The biggest part of that will be those $95,000 per month implementation costs that we have agreed to with Mercer. And then the initial fee for Workday, plus some training and other fees for this year.
Right. But I think for everybody looking at that schedule, when it says the 826,000 unencumbered, that's not including the election. That's all the other numbers that
That's
Commissioner
other,
Lee just
yes.
read.
Yes.
That's what that is.
That's in
Yeah.
addition to.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. Any public comment on that as we have the budget open for those items? That makes it easy then, huh? We will close the public hearing. Thank you, Brian, for participating in that. And now we'll move on to our regular agenda. With our consent agenda, got pages and pages. We've got 26 items on our consent agenda. I would like to see number 5 held. Oh, wait,
They asked
sorry.
for it to be-
Sorry, that's right.
Yeah.
Number 5, if it's all right, to put that on, to strike that item.
Fine.
Number 9, if we could hold that one. Number 14, if we could, I didn't get any documents on that one, so I was wondering if we could continue that for a week.
I had the same
No
question
documents.
/ problem. I couldn't get a document for it. I wasn't sure if it was just my thing was broken or not.
I tried both, my laptop and so if we could put that on consent to continue for 1 week, we get the documents. If we could hold number 20. for discussion. Number 22. And then if we could continue number 26, there's no documents on 26. Any others? All right. And then going to our regular agenda, everything will be on consent except for what we will pull off. Let's have I had a discussion with Dave on these veteran abatement applications. And since we're putting the findings in the paragraphs themselves, it's recommended that we don't need to actually
State the finding.
go state the finding because the finding's been stated. And if you're comfortable with that, I wouldn't mind leaving 5, 6, and 7. Is that correct?
On consent for approval.
On consent, if you're okay with that.
As-
For approval.
And for approval,
For approval.
yep. Yeah, we probably ought to make sure and state
Need to reword those.
which when, so for approval.
Oh.
Okay.
Well, then let's hold 5 for a quick discussion.
Okay, hold 5. Thanks, Paul. That was Paul Jones speaking from the audience. All right, if we could hold number 8, number 9. 11, 12, if we could continue that till June 6th. We could hold 13, 15. 17, and with 17 and 18, I just don't understand why we have Dr. Joseph Minor as the one that's the executive director on this. I don't know if it was just copy-paste problem, or if there was a need for it, I don't know. Anyway,
Just needs to be updated.
okay. Okay. Number 19, if we could hold number 19.
So you still want to hold 17 and 18, right?
Well, I have 17 as a hold, but I had circled the 2 for why Dr. Minor was on there. I don't need to hold number 17. It was more for just the, why we have that. Let's see. We hold number 24 for discussion. I think that'd be a good one just to kind of explain what we're doing since that one hit the papers too. Number 26, if we could hold 26. And then we'll get to, and just for purposes, since we're doing this, if we could continue work session number 1 to June 6th. Any others or any other?
Just for clarification, on regular agenda, item 6 is the one that needs to be held instead of 5. Item 6 is the one that there's a recommendation to deny instead of 5.
On regular agenda?
Yeah.
That's not what I have on the agenda. For the meltwater?
No,
On the
unregular.
veteran abatement.
Regular,
Oh, you're
it's the
going to
better
regular,
abatement.
okay.
Yeah, it was
Veteran
6 that has a recommendation to deny instead of 5, so 5 is fine to go to consent to approve. if
Okay,
you
so
would like
hold
to do that.
6.
Yeah.
Okay.
And 5 and 7 can go to consent as approvals.
Yep. Yes.
Okay, that one's gone. We struck that one. Okay, we good? Yes,
I believe that number 14 on the consent is related to number 22 on the regular agenda. I know we tried just bringing it up too, and I don't know why it's not coming up. But the issue is it's the contract for $45,000, or not 22, excuse me. Find the right one. It's for the virtual training. So yeah, it'd be number 22. We think that those two are related. Is that not, is that correct? Okay, which one is? What's that? Okay, never mind then. Two different ones. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we're gonna continue that for 1 week then, Sheriff. Okay, so the first one up, number 9. The question I had was this property originally in Greenbelt? And if it was, are we gonna execute this? We won't execute this until after the Greenbelt taxes are paid, if it is.
Right, that's
That was-
that's the question. I honestly don't know if this property's in Greenbelt. It's not something that I personally get involved with, and this condition is a common condition. I forgot to tack it into my staff report, and so I know that there's a road dedication, so it's possible that they may need to pay Greenbelt before they can record their plat. And so they'll get with Diane Garcia of the assessor's office and determine if the property, if there needs to be Greenbelt rollback tax paid. But I saw that I'd failed to put that in the staff report and had to tack it somewhere so that it was considered, so.
Okay. So I don't have a problem going forward and approving this as long as
Well,
we've gone through
I just
that.
have a question for
Sure.
clarification. It's not,
Sure.
I'm just wondering why we charge the Greenbelt rollback on land they're deeding to us for roads.
Yeah,
Actually, there's a provision in the code that says that the ownership can't transfer until that has been paid.
Okay,
And they're not paying it on the whole farm, it's just the little part that's in the
that's my
road.
point, is
they're
it was on a
dedicated.
portion they're deeding to the county in essence.
Yeah.
Right.
That's why I
It's just a
wondered.
small-
Okay, but that helps.
just the
Okay.
small road dedication area, so.
All right, I'll go ahead and move that we approve the Shelley's Acres subdivision Plat A as described in consent agenda item number 9.
Second.
I've got a motion and a second to approve number 9 on the consent agenda. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
That passes 3-0. All right, we continued 14. Now we're down to consent agenda item number 20.
Nope, got approved already. Did we need to? Okay. Okay.
All right, Robert, I know we've gone through this back and forth and up and down all kinds of different directions. If you can kind of explain a little bit, maybe we can have a little bit of discussion on it.
Sure. Robert Moore, Utah County Attorney's Office. I was asked to draft an amendment to the HR rules related to sections 7A3, excuse me, 6A3, Roman numeral 6A3, and 9A1A of the HR rules. And really, it's a simple amendment, and what it is that it's clarifying that elected officials and county commission staff are not required to submit documentation of their work time each pay period, number one. And number two, that elected officials and county commission staff are not subject to Utah County leave policies. So they will not be accruing sick leave, vacation, nor will they be expending sick leave and vacation. That's really the substance of the amendment today for you.
Okay, the only question I have, and I've been going around and around in circles with it a little bit. We are, part of the reason why we're exempting out elected officials is it seems weird that we're putting time stamps in there, you know, we're punching for time. And yet we're salaried employees, and then our staff being at-will employees as well. It's more of a performance-based than it is on a time card basis. But as we're moving to the new system in which we have the ability now, as I understand it, to actually exempt out individuals in the sense that they're gonna be paid their salary, and then the punching of the time card is just a reference point for us. I'm having a little bit of hesitation. This is more of a discussion with my fellow commissioners here. And looking at salaried employees into the future, where they're salaried, but they're not punching a time card, but they're still punching a time card for tracking purposes for us to do evaluations, to do proper evaluations as supervisors or department heads to know where they're at and what's going on. So it's, because I find it ironic that have been times in which salaried employees had put less than 35 hour or 40 hours in a week, and yet they were docked on their pay and their salaried employees, which seems to go against the salary basis. So with our, and I know I was a big proponent for pushing for our staff to be exempted from this because it didn't make any sense to me. But now that our HRIS can actually pay and exempt them out and pay their salaries and still have the ability to track the time in which is there or adjusted, I'm not sure if that doesn't work for our assistants, not elected officials. Elected officials, totally different situation, but for our administrative assistants. And so I want to bring that up as just a conversation. I could go either way on this. I'm not looking to push one
Me
direction or
too.
another.
My only, again, going back to this policy is, I'm with you. The punching of a clock is crazy because, again, yesterday, sheriff's elected, we're elected, and I know we were all working to some degree or another with other things. So my whole problem in why this came about is right now we're on a paper format which we fixed, which everybody writes 8 to 5, 8 to 5, 8 to 5 just to show 40 hours, which I just have a fundamental problem with filling in a paper just to fill in a paper. Whether our staff gets paid for vacation and sick time doesn't really bother me. Whether it's put in their salary and they still work through us, I don't care. I really, either way.
The only it was pointed out, I think, on a statutory basis that there is a requirement for us to show, to a certain degree, time, value, and money allocated when we're talking, not, again, on elected officials' point, but on those that are working for the county, and that's where I had my pause. Commissioner?
Yeah, I just have several reservations about this all the way around, so it concerns me just starting to exempt out specific individuals or specific positions, when there are other positions within the county that are very similar, that, aren't included on the list. I think from my understanding of our HRIS system, it is, able to configure to our requirements for reporting and making sure these people get paid for the job they do. And that's what's important to me. But I also think there is some degree of accountability that has to be held to for anyone that's receiving a paycheck from the county, and I would be hesitant to remove that.
So what, can I ask?
Unless we do it, more unilaterally.
So which one specifically? Because I think this one here refers to elected officials and then their staff.
Yeah,
So if we take out the county commission staff,
So our staff, and I think I even have a little reluctancy on elected officials. I think there's probably instances where they could, if they wish to document, they could document it. If they don't, they don't.
Might make a suggestion to you, as you mentioned the HRI system, which is in the process, we've heard a lot about that today, is in the process of going forward, and that system seems to be able to cover what you're looking for it to do. Maybe you strike this and bring it back if needed, after the HRA system goes into place and you feel like that's
so I'll
covered.
tell you why I disagree with that. So
Okay.
I don't disagree with the logic of making this more uniform. But the county and all of its policies have already exempted 10 individuals. The 10 elected officials are the only ones here that do receive a paycheck but are the only ones ineligible for unemployment, a lot of the same benefits. So we are already exempted from so many other things. It's ridiculous to, in my opinion, to keep us in the same time tracking thing and not just say, U10, here's the rules that govern everybody else. To make it more uniform, everybody says, well, why wouldn't you do this for all of your appointed department heads? Because they get vacation and sick time. I'm pretty sure most of them would not be happy if we remove that and put them on an exempted list like the elected officials. Again, it's not that they don't work any more hours than we do necessarily, but they are compensated with vacation, sick, and their salary as well. The difference is, as elected officials, we chose to do this, and we don't get some of those same benefits. That's why, to me, exempting, it's the most ridiculous thing that I have a timesheet filled out for me that says 8 to 5, 8 to 5, 8 to 5, 8 to 5, and then yesterday doesn't say anything, but yet, it just, it's a lie. It just, so, whatever.
And this is kind of this original proposal here is more of a kind of a belt and suspender approach. Elected officials are already, I think, have been viewed as exempt, if you will. But this is clarifying that they
Right, but
are.
the policy doesn't state it clearly.
And that's true. And so, another option would be to, as you said, take out the county commission staff for now and just leave it elected officials and then approve it that way. And then if you decide later on that you need to do something different than that, that's also an option that you have to.
And I feel more comfortable doing that so that we actually solidify it in writing what we're actually performing and doing now. Because the scenario is, by law, the elected officials have a certain salary and they can't go above it, and they should not be paid under it. So even if they were to check 30 hours 1 week in their box and then paid 30 hours somewhere, that has to be made up during the year because they have to be paid
They have
that
a set
salary.
annual salary. That's
Right.
correct.
Yeah. So it doesn't make any sense for us to actually be tracking hours for elected officials. I guess the only thing that would be good about that is that you could say, well, then you can go back and grandma it, right? And somebody could come back and say, well, you're only working 30 hours? Or maybe we'll have it, well, this person's working 70 hours, this person's working 60. Then it gets into a whole political
We
realm.
can
that is
always grandma
ridiculous.
our calendars, our mileage logs, our expense reports
And they have been in the past.
Yep.
Things.
Absolutely.
regularly, which is okay. Okay, any other discussion then?
Any other thought?
No, that's kind of
Okay,
the thoughts I
then-
had.
Then I'll try this as a motion. I'll move that we approve and authorize the resolution stated in 20 with the following amendments, that anywhere it refers to county commission staff. So, for example, in part 1, and county commission staff are eliminated from the entire resolution, anywhere where it refers to county commission staff.
And there has to be some, oh, okay. Number 2 as well. In the sense
Yes, and
of
number 2, yeah,
it
anywhere.
implied.
And I'll have that fixed today.
I'm not gonna second that. I'm still not comfortable with it, but
Okay. Then I will suspend the rules to second that motion. Any other discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Say aye. Aye. Opposed?
nay.
That's 2-1, with Commissioner Graves and myself, Commissioner Lee, for it, and Commissioner Ivy against it. Okay. That was 20. 22, you get to stay right there.
I am here, yes.
All right, I know you've been working hard on this agreement as well.
And I will state as to the agreement, this is based almost exclusively off the RFP and the responses to the RFP. So everything that's in here is pretty much exactly from the RFP, and also detailing the details of it relates to the phases are from the response to the RFP. So I've incorporated all those things in here. The one change that I was requested to make a couple weeks ago was to talk to them about a price modification to match the other bid. I did approach them on that issue. We had some back and forth. Where we ended up was that we would have that same price, but we would add travel expenses on top of that with a not to exceed the price. So not to exceed their bid price. So there was a difference of $3,000. If the travel expenses are less than $3,000, then we'll save money. If not, we won't go over what their bid price was in any event. They have agreed to this agreement, and subject to your approval today, we're ready to go.
With that, there is, I understand the RFP process, and we put it out there, and we copied as much as possible coming forward. But along with the RFP process, we come down to, this is now engagement in the scope and objectives. There's a few things in here that I would like to discuss and potentially modify one sentence. It's in page number 2, under A and then 2. It's the last sentence. We had talked about this pretty extensively, back and forth on what this sentence actually would look like and mean. And so I want to make sure, because my understanding was that it would read something like this. Utah County competes with, I'd like to change it to, let me put it this way. Change it to read this way. Utah County competes with comparable public employers as designated with the Utah County Office of Human Resource Management and with the County Board of Commissioners. And there's a comma in there, and then we can continue the sentence. The areas in which I'd like to strike out are the areas where it says along the Wasatch Front. I think that's too narrow in our band, and then designating that we are doing this with the Board of County Commissioners, not just in consultation with, but with the Board of County Commissioners.
Okay. I did talk to you about this before, and you're aware, as I mentioned to you before, that Utah Code, this is state statute, 1733-7, states that the County Office of Personnel Management shall design and administer the pay plan. The pay plan includes the salary survey. We've adopted that.
Who has to approve the budget and execute the pay plan?
The pay, so what it says.
So there's no reason to do a study and do a pay plan unless the commission's gonna sign off on it. It's a
Well-
waste of taxpayer money.
So how the statute has it set forth is basically the HR department is the one who designs it
Right.
and administers it. And then after it's submitted to you for a final approval, that's when you have the ability to approve it, reject it, or amend it.
Right, but if we can just be involved from the beginning and help make sure it's something that meets the muster of what we set out to do, I don't understand why that's an issue.
Unfortunately, because the statute says that they are the ones, the HR department is the one who has to design this, it's their responsibility, and the county commission doesn't come in by state statute until later on in this process.
So what in that sentence would subvert her from doing that?
So what I tried to do was, is try to work as best I could that would give her the autonomy to design this salary survey. At the same time, having it be in consultation with you, so because obviously she doesn't want to go through this whole process and then have you say, we're not going to approve this.
Approve it.
That's a problem for her, and she agrees with that. And I've talked to her at length about that issue. But the statute says it's her responsibility to design it, not the county commission. And so,
Statute also said on the hiring process, and we changed that, so what do we do to change this?
this is state statute,
State
this
statute.
isn't county
It's a
ordinance.
legislative
State
issue.
So
statute.
let's break it apart. So there's one part in here where it says that we're gonna look along the Wasatch Front. Who designated that wording?
That was from the RFP. So I was just pulling it straight from the RFP.
Right. So did
And that's
Cami
been
design
typical in the
that?
past.
Did Cami design that? Is that her design?
Yeah, I think she would she would look at what's the comparable jurisdictions to compare the salaries of the employees of Utah County versus,
But
whether it
I've
be
seen her
Davis
list of
County, Weber
comparables.
County.
In my opinion, she's wrong.
And her comparables don't even have just along the Wasatch Front.
That's right.
Okay.
So that makes it inconsistent just at the start. on the Wasatch Front. So if we eliminated that, if I was looking at her comparables now, we could eliminate the Wasatch Front and say she's designing this
And the only,
because
the only
it's bigger.
language that I'm raising any issue with here is the ability for the commission to approve upfront who the comparables are, because again, that's the part where the state statute says she designs and administers the county pay plan. It's not until it's brought back to you, and again, under our county pay plan, we've adopted this salary survey as part of that pay plan. And it's not until that salary survey comes back to you with their results, that's when you have the ability to approve it, reject it, or amend it. And that's why we put in here in consultation, because we did not want you to go through all this work,
Right,
pay
but-
the money, and then get it rejected.
Okay, but again, all we're trying to do is prevent that exact same thing. We're trying to give the framework in which we do with everything else, and that is literally say, it's much better for the commission to be involved up front. I know what the state statute says, so she can present it. But my point is unless it says this, why go through all that if the commission's not gonna be involved, because we're the ones that have to account. The one thing I know that gets this room more full than any other topic other than the Ice Sheet Arena is pay increases in the county.
Yeah, and I'm not disputing that point. All I'm telling you is under the version I have here, I think you're in compliance with the state statute. If you were to go and have you approve the design of this up front, I don't think you are. And that's the issue that I'm focusing on here.
So Robert, we can, question clarification, we could strike the Wasatch Front,
Yes.
right? So
Yes.
So
I don't think
it
that's-
could very easily read,
That- yeah.
we could negate that particular concern by just striking the Wasatch
Yes.
Front so that it reads with public employers, leaving that a little bit broader so that the scope can be developed. And then we certainly, in consultation, could go visit with her, email her and say, we believe
yes.
these type of markets, this type of area, region would be an area that we would like to see included in the research you're gathering, and that's completely in compliance and consistent with the
Yeah,
naming
and-
verbiage.
yeah, and-
So
and-
we'd
and I
still
think
have
I'm
the
com-
flexibility
yes.
to reach out to her and give direction and consultation on what we would want it to look like, and we could specifically strike that part.
I think you could, yes. You could have that consultation, and that's the point. We try to figure out which way is gonna work under the state
But
statute.
phase one, we already do that. That's my whole point. This thing does not agree with this though. Phase one, project initiation. Meet with stakeholders including department heads, human resources, county commissioners, other stakeholders. That's step 2. Step 4, then confirm list of comparables. So we're already involved.
She's having you involved, yes, because you wanted to be involved, and she wants you involved. As my discussion with Cammie, she does want you involved in this process, to consult with her on this.
Well, she should.
Yeah, because ultimately, it's a waste of money, it's a waste of time to go through this whole process and then come to you with whatever the results are, and you say, no, we're not gonna do it. And that's not what she's hoping for. She's hoping to work together, but it's bottom line is the state statute gives her the autonomy or the authority over the design of it.
Well, the state's
that's-
just wrong. Just like they don't know how to fund an election, fund a jail, do a lot of things. The state's just wrong.
Yeah,
So the only word we're arguing over is taking out either consult with or just with.
Well,
I mean,
then
Well,
either
we might as
consult
well-
with or with.
We might as well approve this, but since this is recorded, I want my HR director to know I'm a no unless we're absolutely heavily involved in every aspect. And it's a waste of money.
and I'm not trying to argue with you about this, honestly. I'm just trying to work within the parameters that we have by state law and with our own ordinance and what we've done in the RFP. I'm trying to get that into this agreement that's gonna reflect what that state law is, and so that's all I've tried to do.
And if there's no problem, I would be fine striking the Wasatch Front to open it up. I
No
think
problem with me.
That's more consistent with,
That actually gives more
right.
autonomy, or in a way, right? It gives her
In a
ability to
way,
go
but I
further away.
think if our desire as a board is to open that up and have a broader look at where we're going for comparables, I think that would make sense.
And I think part of this RFP too was based somewhat on history too. In the past, we've done a couple of these RFPs, 2007.
Well, okay, but let's look at the history. I came in here and all I've ever heard from all the employees is the history of salary studies in this county sucks. That's literally what they tell me. They haven't been fair, they haven't been equitable, they haven't been done right. So do I really care about the history? No.
That's fine.
We're trying to change
Yeah.
it and do it the right way.
Okay, fair enough.
I'm just gonna go back one more time to this. So The argument is that, I mean, state statute, you're saying state statute says that we have to put "and in consultation with" instead of just saying
No.
"and with Utah County."
And let me clarify, what I'm saying to you is that the county commission can't design the pay plan.
Well,
And
if we're-
But if we
we're-
do with,
if
then
we're
it
doing
says she is.
If we're doing it with,
all I'm saying is, if there's ultimately there's a decision in the design initially, CAMI has to make that call. The HR department makes that call. Ultimately, you get the final say, but initially, under
Funny,
state.
because that's not how the RFP was set up.
Well, this language was put in the RFP after we discussed it with the commission as well, in consultation with, because there was a discussion initially about having the commission make that determination up front. And we said, well, we cited the statute and said, we don't think you can do that way. And so we put the language that's in here now, actually from the RFP. I think we had discussed that with the commission. And if you want to change it, I'm open to that. I'm trying to comply with what I see as,
I'm just trying to nail this down, so.
please.
So it's of your legal opinion that if we were to take out "in consultation" and strike that out, that we would be going against state statute?
No, what I'm saying to you is if you change it to mean that you're the ones making that
No, it says
determination.
"and with." As I'm reading this, the first position on this thing is the HR resource management individual, which is CAMI, and with the Utah Board of Commissioners.
I think as long as you understand that CAMI has the ability to design this, even if you don't agree initially with the jurisdictions that she picks.
Well, she could do that,
You could do that.
And she could do
Ultimately,
that.
then you can reject it if you want to.
right?
And you can amend it. It's the funny thing. And
Right.
later on, you can amend it.
So I just don't understand why, I mean, I know what "in consultation," I know what that means to a certain extent, but I don't understand why that can't be. If it doesn't go against state statute, then why do we have it there?
No, I'm not saying, what I'm saying to you is, the way that I heard your language initially was that you made the decision together. And I'm not sure that's really what the state statute
So-
reflects.
Here's my other question. I know it's state statute, according to you, which I believe you, but she delegates a lot of authority that's by state statute. So why can't she delegate some of the authority and decision-making to the commission? If you said it's her desire to do our will, then why can't we do that? She,
I-
by email, she dedicates and gives away her authority. So find out
Well,
for me in state code, because
17
our acting director is right here.
I'll do that. So in 1733-7, sub 1B, it says, "The county executive, county legislative body, and county office of personal management may not delegate those functions to a separate county office, agency, or department." So she cannot delegate these responsibilities that she has right here to another department, agency, or anything else. She has to oversee it, she has to be involved, she has to make that design, this pay plan. This is, again, I'm just here as a messenger, this is the state law, so.
Well, then I
But-
don't
but
care. We can
I'm
pass
okay
it
with-
how it is, but
I'm okay with what you're saying, if you just take out the word "in consultation," as long as you understand that if there was a
I don't care what it
conflict
says. I'm just
initially.
trying to let everybody understand. I'm an absolute no unless we're absolutely involved and make sure this is an unbiased, truly comprehensive salary study without tainting whatsoever.
Yeah. And I think, Greg, as you mentioned yourself, in the phases, you see that you are absolutely involved throughout this process. That's the
No,
intent,
we're in consultation.
but that's involvement.
Yeah.
But
My
all
kids
that
think
means
they're
is that-
involved in the decision makings of my house too, but they're not. They're in
All-
consultation with me and my wife.
Sure. All that means is that you don't have the final say initially.
Well,
Initially. Later on, you do.
Later on, we do.
we
That-
just want to get to a point where we've seen some of the history, which we want good data on this. We want it to be appropriate,
We're
so
all
that
in
we can
agreement
make
here.
decisions
Yeah.
appropriate with it. And as, I think as a commissioner, I have found that I make better judgments when I'm involved along the process instead of just at the very end being handed a piece of paper that says, this is this is what we should do, and this is a good idea, and this is why we're doing it. And I haven't seen the process.
And trust me.
Yeah, just trust me on it. That always causes
Sure.
problems for me, and so we want to be involved along the process. We want to be, we talked about during the decision-making processes, when there's a fork in the road on which direction we should go, the commissioners want to be there in consultation
Yes.
or with
Yeah.
the HR department to say, what are we gonna do? Because market studies, it's just like polling. You can do it any way you want and get a result that you want and desire at the end, as long as you design it or get the questions in the right direction. So we wanna be there at those forks to say, this is what we would support. And I think that accomplishes that with, just with the Utah County Board of Commissioners.
So the language you'd like then would be public employers, take out the along the Wasatch Front,
That one's totally in,
okay? And then
Contradictory
as
to it.
with respect to, as designated with the Utah County Office of Human Resource Management, and then just take out in consultation,
with,
and say, and with Utah County Board of Commissioners.
and I think we understand
Okay.
what's going on
Yeah,
there.
and-
I don't have the time to go up there and sit there and
Right.
watch and design this thing and sit with HR department and try to get it all worked out and all the nuts and bolts of it. But I do think that the commissioners want to be there at the times in which there are critical decisions in process and path. That's what I think.
I think she'd want you there too.
That's
my
where
understanding.
that's where we want to be. We don't want to be there on the nuts and bolts side of it, how it's all put together and how it's all working and
Right.
administered.
Great. So those two changes, any other changes that you wanted to make as a commission?
I'll make a motion then that we approve the authorized agreement, with the stipulated changes.
Second?
I got a motion and a second to approve number 22 on the consent agenda as stipulated. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That passes 3-0. Okay, 26 was continued for 1 week.
Hey, Paul, tell us why this veteran doesn't get his abatement, or why you think he shouldn't.
Vicki Westergaard, Clerk Auditor's Office. The reason that I recommend this one to be denied is because they bought the property in August of 2016, and state code says they have to own it on January 1st to be able to get the abatement for that year. So they didn't own it on time.
So this is for 2016, as it
Right,
says.
they're getting it for 17, but they're ineligible for
But they're
16.
ineligible because of the purchase date.
Right.
That was, because Paul's comment, I thought, oh, I read that wrong. No, okay, I'm good.
That makes sense.
I move that we deny the late 2016 veteran abatement application as stated in regular agenda item number 6.
Second.
I got a motion and a second to deny the late abatement as stated in number 6. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
That passes 3-0. I wonder for the future, as we're doing these, if we just put one or the other. If it's approved, put approve, and if it's denied, put a deny, and then it'll be easier for us to walk through them. That takes us through 7. Okay, number 8 on the uncollectibles. There's some in here I'd like some explanation on. Everbridge is one of them, which I thought was like $1,900. I'd like to know, so there's one for $1,900 that's uncollectible from Everbridge. I want to know what that's about, what that's all about, why we can't collect that one, who's not wanting to participate, or what the story is behind that. And then we have a lot of them on here. The witness reimbursement. I don't even know what that means, but if somebody could talk to us about what that means, witness reimbursement, that seems to be the rest of them. And then there's one for Jail Industries for $74.
Well, and all
And
the
then-
witness reimbursements are less than 120 days old, yet we're writing them off, so.
Yeah. Then there's an overtime reimbursement. I'd like to know what that one's about as well.
I got a suspicion that that one means somebody got paid and didn't pay us back.
I actually have to admit, other than the summary here, I don't have all the details on these. I do know that Paul had sat down with staff and went through this, so maybe he can help us step through this.
Is it your overtime? Just kidding.
Paul Jones, Utah County Attorney's Office. We may need to call Deneen down to get all the details. I believe the Everbridge is Mapleton City, and I also believe they never entered a contract and we still invoiced them. That's about all the information I have on.
And on the Everbridge, I
on
do know
Everbridge.
there was one city, I wasn't sure which one, but it was
Yeah.
Mapleton.
Now, the thing I don't know is if they're
Now,
getting.
that's interesting because they were literally paying Springville City, and we have a contract with Springville City, so we should have received that money.
Well, and if you look at the date of this was back in.
That's right, that,
April of 2016.
right. That was when we first instituted it.
Yeah,
in
and,
essence.
and there was a lot of things up in the air at that time. We had moved forward, but we still didn't have a lot
But
of
that's the
agreements
only
signed.
agreement I'm aware of,
Yeah.
how that one works. I think we should hold off on that one. Can we,
We could continue.
I was
There's
gonna say,
nothing-
because.
yeah.
nothing urgent here at all.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
The only thing I verified is that we didn't have a contract with Mapleton for the Everbridge.
I know we didn't, but my understanding was we were keeping it the same. They're in an agreement, they're Everbridge with Springville, in partnership. And when we entered into Springville, the portion that they paid to them should have been reimbursed through Springville to us. That's my understanding of how that one worked.
Okay.
The other thing on that too is if there's one city that drops out, then
Everybody
then
else should share it.
it should share. Well, I mean, it's not us that picks up the tab on it. We're supposed to share everything out to the rest of those that
Yeah,
are
so
involved.
essentially it would be prorated out
Right.
against the
And that
rest.
So
was-
there's 12 cities, we'd all pay $150.
And thus,
whatever.
why the importance of before we ever make the commitment, we have the commitment from those that are participating.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Details.
So is it okay then if we continue this for a week and sit with Deneen, I guess, and get more of the details, and I can also work on that first?
Yeah,
one?
we can continue, that's no problem.
And I'll move that we continue item 8 for 1 week.
Second.
I got a motion and a second to continue number 8, regular agenda for 1 week. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passes 3-0. Okay, number 9, on this one here, I'm questioning why we even have this on our agenda. My first thought was is that maybe it might be one that we put in the maybe category a couple weeks ago, and therefore we're coming back to ratify it. Otherwise, it seems like we only have one option, and that is to approve, which seems contrary to what we should be able to do, which is.
Let me explain, because
approve
this
or
is
deny.
actually one that I did poll at the last minute. I'm in an unusual circumstance in that one of the descendants, actually the son of Mr. Felt, used to be my next-door neighbor. It came to my attention just as we were getting ready to begin the sale, that they were actually doing or participating in the sale to perfect a lien on the property. And so I instructed him he needed to just redeem it. And they said that there was information. We did not realize that there was potentially an IRS lien on this, which further complicates it. But he argued at the time that it was a situation where, but he was the son and not the actual owner of the property, and that they were going to do things. And at this point, I, as the auctioneer, was put in a ethical dilemma of two different ways. I could bid it, and then they would be in a situation that they potentially could perfect the lien, or by bidding it and just continuing to push it on up to the highest bidder, then also I would be in a situation where I was enriching them. With that disclosure and what I learned, that put me in the position that in consultation with our attorneys, we felt that it was best to go ahead and pull it from this year's sale, further look at the IRS lien issue, and also look at the arguments put forth by the Felt brothers, the sons of Roger, that the Department of Justice was okay with this. But it just got real messy real quick, and then just to keep our process above board and transparent, we decided it would be best to pull it in that name. So that's what happened and why.
Well, based on the two attorneys that bobbed their head, are you sure you got good advice?
So I'm gonna go back to the basics on this with that, anything that comes onto our agenda, we usually approve or deny or modify, and then approve or deny. And in this case, this was a decision made by your office, by you specifically.
Which I statutorily.
Which you fully have the right to do, so I'm
So why here?
questioning why it even comes onto our agenda to,
Why
I
you
mean,
don't just get to do
to
it.
to ratify, I mean, we don't really have a say in what
Yeah, go
this
sell it.
does.
I think
State code again. The state code provides that it has to be with the consent of this body.
that's why you had some beforehand that we, with your consent,
State code
I,
is messed up when another elected official gets to tell another elected, that's not.
So,
We didn't write
so
it.
Dave,
I
you're,
know.
you're saying that we do have the option to deny.
Since you have to consent to the approval, yes, you do. He has the right to pull them off with your consent.
And then what would he do, hold a special cell?
Bert
An
Harvey with,
ethical violation?
with Utah County Clerk Auditor's Office, I'd like to let the commission know that, if you deny it, we will, promptly put it on the next sale, which will be next May.
Yeah, which, see, that's
Right.
the point right there.
I agree.
That-
That's when the next one's scheduled.
The next May tax sale is next May?
Yeah, the next
So-
May, the
so
next
why
tax
would
sale is
we-
scheduled.
Why would we not say that we acknowledged that this was pulled from the sale?
Because the state statute says consent.
We have to approve.
No, it says
Or-
with their consent. I believe the language is consent.
I'd also like to point out, the only reason it is on your agenda is because it was not redeemed by the family after the sale. Had it been redeemed, we wouldn't have needed to go through this process, but it currently stands as delinquent. So being that it was pulled from the sale, being that it was still delinquent, the taxes were paid, obviously the statute requires it comes before the commission for approval.
Wasted time.
Yeah.
I'm very sorry.
Well, then, once again, let me reaffirm my faith that Mr. Thompson is doing his job right, and I'll move that we approve item number 9.
You could clarify that you're just consenting to his withdrawal
No, that
of
was
that
not
property.
an unintentional dig at Provanor.
Okay, whatever.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. Oh, and motion and a second. If we could for the future as well, anytime it says that the property is deemed in the best interest of the public, it'd be nice to be able to get the best interest of the public before we actually sit in this meeting. Otherwise, we're guessing again. All in favor?
Aye.
That passes 3-0. Okay, let's see,
13?
11?
11.
Oh, I marked that, sorry.
All right, go through the short history of this one.
Oh, yes. Boy, we started this well, I started in November. You guys started in December, and we've been going at it for a while. It's been through the planning commission 3 times now, and so we've got it to a point where we feel like we've addressed your comments and feedback, and as well as planning commission. What we've come up with is an amendment that will establish a minor subdivision process, 2 lots or less. When you have a subdivision application with 2 lots or less, an applicant would have the ability to, rather than go through the full process of going to the planning commission and then
Hold
to
on
this
just
body.
just a
Sure.
second, Brennan. Are you talking about number 11 or number 10?
Oh, I'm talking about 10.
10 got passed.
10,
10,
we're good with
yeah.
10? Woohoo! Sorry,
Yeah.
that's been going on a long time. Okay,
That one went to consent.
okay,
So
sorry for
Still want to
the.
relive the past?
No,
you got the
if we
verbiage
can,
right on
I'd
that
really
one.
like to move
So
on
you were
from that
talking
one.
about the amendment in regards to requirements for plat amendments.
Sure, thank you for catching me there. So what this is, what this is, this really relates more to kind of the developments we have up in the Sundance area. For the most part, we have different development types. We have subdivisions, PUDs, rec resorts, mountain home developments. Most of the applications you see are subdivisions, but the developments up in the Sundance area, rec resorts, mountain home developments, they typically have HOAs. And so from time to time, I'll bring an amended plat to you. Usually they're just 1 or 2 lots. What this is about is just making it clear, having a paper trail to show that. So the last one you saw, Timp Haven Plat 14, we want to make sure that Timp Haven Plat 14, which is really Lot 19 of Plat A of Timp Haven Homes, we want to make sure that they're tied to the CCNRs and the maintenance agreements for open space, and so that's what this is just to show that that these amended plats are actually tied to old CCNRs and agreements, so.
The most important, well, whenever I see it underlined and bolded, that means that that's the standout, right?
Yep.
So that note is the important part that you're referring
Yeah.
to, that we make sure it's noted so that any future looking at it will say, oh, there is a note here, I better go look at this, so we don't get caught.
Correct. So yeah, there's two parts to that. I mean, I would say the most important part is the restrictive covenant. There'll be a document that gets recorded that says, hey, this plat's tied to the old CCNRs. And then so that a property owner knows that there is this document that ties it to these CCNRs and agreements, there'll be a note put on the plat that gives the property owner or the plat user the ability to know about that plat or that document, so.
Okay. Thank you. I just wanted to make sure and go down through that and
Sure.
have a little history of it. Looks good.
Okay. I'll move that we adopt an ordinance to amend the Utah County Land Use Ordinance as stated in regular agenda item number 11.
Second?
Got a motion and a second to adopt number 11 as stated. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
That passes 3-0. Okay, we're on to number 13 now. Changing some status.
You don't look like Merritt. It says
Yeah,
Merritt.
I'm not Merritt. Mark Brady, Assistant Director, HR.
I guess the biggest question coming into this is why would we change from grant-funded and do
Yep.
full-time merit status, 10 employees?
About 2008, most of the DDAP positions, due to one of the commissioner's desires, were designated as grant-funded. If they had any part of them that was funded from grant money. In the intervening years, those grants have disappeared, or expired, and it was overkill in the beginning to designate them as grant-funded. They've been permanent for many years. So these 10 positions,
So in other words, in this case, we are now going and changing what should have been changed when we fully funded it.
right, all right.
I still have a problem with why we funded.
I'm sorry?
Again, the philosophy is grants, once they disappear, so does that job.
Yes.
In most cases.
Yeah, right. And in this case, we just continued to have the position. They were essentially career service positions. So.
See, that doesn't quite make sense to me.
Richard, you got a comment? You can come up, Richard.
Why, because we were taking the grant funding, right? And at what levels? As I was reading, I thought it was quite high in the way of the funding that was going on to these individuals in the way of their, so what's I don't understand the change.
Richard Nance, Department of Drug and Alcohol Prevention and Treatment. Several of these were funded by a state Drug Offender Reform Act grant that were made part of the state general fund, ongoing funded. So there's no longer a grant program. It was fully funded through the state legislature. So those, in fact, aren't grant funded anymore. They're permanently funded. The
By the
others,
state.
By the state, yes. So they come through state general fund dollars. That's an ongoing part of the state budget. So that they're not grant funded at all anymore. When the program first started, it was on a year-by-year basis, and we funded those.
So when did that happen? When was that change?
2015, I believe. So a couple of years ago.
So why wasn't that discussion had then?
I couldn't tell you. It's probably my oversight that we didn't do it then. The others were funded through the Federal Substance Abuse Prevention and Treatment Block Grant. So it wasn't a discretionary grant, it was a block grant, which is an ongoing process. It doesn't expire. And so, again, those were established as grant funded because of the thinking of a previous county commissioner. And that would affect all of our positions. So any new position we established after about 2007, 2008, that was funded through the Federal Prevention and Treatment Block Grant, was put on as grant funded. Although they really aren't, when we speak of grants, we speak of discretionary grants, things that have an end point.
Like a 2-year cycle?
Exactly, or a 5-year cycle, or 3+1+1. And we still have a few of those. Some of the prevention positions we have, the Smart Prevention Program Coordinator is on the grant, discretionary grant-funded position we have to keep applying for. Part of her salary is anyway. So these are just not discretionary grant-funded. Some of them weren't in the first place. It was just philosophy of a previous county commission that held that we wanted to put those as considered grant-funded rather than merit.
So they're
But-
already still fully benefited.
Right. Really doesn't change anything, honestly, because
'Cause
the
if these
the
block
funding to
grants
support those.
disappear, you're gonna have to make cuts anyway.
Right.
So when we have that conversation, though, when we say, okay, this is a grant-funded position, it happens all the time. And then we say if this position goes away, if the funding goes away, I don't understand that now, because we're not saying that in this case. We're saying that they're only partially part of the grant funded?
Well, there's, of the ones that are on this list, they are all fully funded either through the Federal Prevention and Treatment Block Grant, which again is not a discretionary grant. It doesn't have an end date on it. It's to be continued in perpetuity and funded through Congress. It's got a required match from the state, which is state general fund dollars, not discretionary grant dollars, and it's funded by the county, which is county general fund dollars, not discretionary grant dollars. So none of these 10 positions are discretionary grant funded. The only ones that ever were the ones that were under the Drug Offender Reform Act, which was only funded with one-time money by the state legislature up until a couple of years ago when it was made permanent.
So this is an attempt, if I understand you right, to clean up your hierarchy table, so
Yeah.
that anytime it says grant funded, those are discretionary grants with expiring terms.
Exactly.
Right. That way we can identify then when a temporary grant expires, that position would be identified.
So this was
whereas
just set up
in
wrong in
these
the
are
first place
ongoing
based under that
fundings.
definition.
Right, and it happened
And-
so long ago, it took a lot of digging to figure out exactly why these were grant funded in the first place. I looked at one of these
Labeled as
positions, I
grant
said,
funded.
why was this ever even grant funded to start with?
And again, Richard, for specific clarification, if for some reason the state decided to terminate this general funding for this particular program that is currently ongoing, then this position would dissolve
Well,
with
not
it.
state, federal, and some of them.
Well, some of them are state, some are
And
federal.
we'd have to do some reduction in force.
Right, then there would be the reduction in force.
Right.
It would be tied into the Congress or the legislative act that would
Right.
address that.
Well, I would like to have more information personally. I hear it, but I'd like to have more of the history behind it for myself, to feel comfortable about it.
You wanna continue?
I would like to continue it for 1 week so they can actually understand it. Right now, it's just kind of going around up on the stratosphere, so they understand what we're actually doing. So, because a lot of times when we look at these things, for me, if it's problematic, do we have other areas of the county in which it's also problematic? And how do we, for the future, don't get caught into the same trap, so that we can be proactive into the future as well? So I would
Every
like to see
department
us.
has a variety of different funding sources. Some only have one or two. We have like 40.
Right.
And that's part of the intricacies of running our particular programs. Health department's the same way. Sheriff has quite a few different funding streams as well. And again, some of this was set up under prior commission, and trying to explain that is gonna be difficult.
Yeah, I'd just like to maybe sit down with you and sit down with whoever else is part of it and
Yeah.
understand it personally. I mean, maybe the other two understand it fully, want to move forward,
That's fine.
but I would,
A week's not gonna change, they're all still being paid and they're still here,
Yeah.
so the status.
They
of-
still have benefits.
Yeah, this have benefits, and that's, it.
So I'm fine with the week, so.
Yeah,
I'll-
just,
I'll-
if there are any of these positions that are vacated, need to be recruited to fill, because they're look like they're grant funded, makes it difficult. So it just compounds our staffing problems going in the future.
Okay, well, I will move that we continue regular agenda item 13 for 1 week.
Second?
I've got a motion and a second to continue regular item number 13 for 1 week. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That passes 3-0. Okay. All right, number 15. I read through this one and I
thought we nixed
I
this.
thought that we did something totally different than what I see here, so I'm not sure.
Yeah, I thought when we
what
met
we were-
last year, this is not what we decided to do.
Well, this comes from
Mitigation, the.
comes from the change from the state that used to run the wildland fire insurance program. Now it's the participation program. And there's that required part that is the participation dollars from the county that has to go to the state. What the state has the options, or excuse me, the county has the options to either pay the state directly or to offset that, as we talked about in some of those meetings, with those qualifying hours. And this is part of that attempt to make the qualifying hours part of the staff that is going to perform work in the county.
Right, but I thought we had found a way for Kevin to use other hours and do this and try it that way without hiring people.
With
That's what I thought that-
existing staff.
That's right. That's,
With the existing staff, we're into this year, 5 months? We're already seeing very little cost associated that we can apply to this program. In a meeting with Commissioner Ivy, where we talked about some of the other options. One of them was to resubmit for the additional 3. We had already approved the 1 from last
to
year.
oversee the whole thing.
That 1 wasn't necessarily to oversee the whole thing, it was just to go ahead and see what they were gonna do within that program. Basically, it was adding another position that runs in line with what we currently staff.
No, it was, I'm pretty sure, we had the discussion right here. And I remember that one person was supposed to identify everything and capture everything with the state and track it and make sure for all of our costs reduce on that mitigation cost sheet. And that's what they were supposed to do. That was the one. See, this is my issue in
I
that.
thought we were pretty specific in that we did
I do
not
too.
want to hire more
That's
to
right.
offset the cost. We wanted to do it through,
Because we could have them do it so Woodland so Woodland Hills, for example. As long as we coordinated it, we had the people from the state sitting right where Paul is and right there say, yes, as long as you guys facilitate it and you run it, then you get credit for this. And that's why we went this route. And I know you guys kept saying, you guys need to hire them. We had like 5 different meetings. You guys need to hire these people. You need to hire these people. And every time we met, we still never hired these people because this was the plan we went. And so I don't understand why 5 months later in the wettest season, why all of a sudden we can't get money to, because our crews aren't out there doing stuff, why we're not making much headway out, I just don't understand it.
And it's obvious that there seems like there's some miscommunication here. And this is what the state had stated at
Right.
that time was, and we even worded it this way. So if I were to send up 3 Utah County employees to Woodland Hills Days and they have 100 people up there, we can only account for 3 people.
Because Woodland Hills started that.
That is correct. Whereas with the county areas and our sole area of responsibility, we have to create our own. And so if you're looking for those big dollar commitments where we're gonna meet our match of 377,000, we're looking at full-time positions in order to coordinate this. And that's what we proposed before, and that was the same discussion.
Okay, but the reason we didn't was because we did not get dollar for dollar on these positions. We only got 50% of the cost of these 4 employees for our mitigation. So we were going to spend $400,000 in employees and get $160,000 in mitigation costs. So we said, forget it.
that was the only reason why we went forward with the plan.
Right.
Was
Had
'cause
we
we were
gotten
gonna
dollar for
offset
dollar
it.
on the people, they'd have been hired.
Well, and I'm still a little confused on that because I'm looking at the paper here, and this is what was
Yeah, I
distributed.
remember that sheet.
This covers 100%.
Not the employees' pay.
The employees paid, if they go out and if they're working in,
There are 3,
like if they're working on a fire engine and bringing it up to service, their time qualifies under wildfire preparedness, not just mitigation.
there are 3 levels that they can perform work at that does make the qualification for the hours.
Yeah.
There's prevention, there's mitigation.
Okay,
and
but,
there's-
so we have
preparedness.
one person, okay, so let's follow this logic. 4 people get us to $377,000, or in other words, each person is worth $95,000. Let's round up and make it easy, okay?
Correct.
Has the one person we've done made near $50,000 worth of mitigation reduction in cost to that schedule?
And that's what we're hoping to capture, yes.
Has that one person right now already made us up to $50,000?
We haven't hired that one person right now. Initially, the one person that we've been trying to hire was for this. In an email with Merritt, there was, I think, a misunderstanding where I told her that we were gonna go for the additional 3. All 4 were put on this agenda. Initially, we were looking just to capture the 1, but in a discussion with Commissioner Ivy that we had as a group, it was thought that seeing how we're already behind the curve so far, that to make up this money in our state obligations
Make it
is
up.
to go with
Sure,
those
yeah,
additional
so-
3 positions.
So let's not execute the plan that we talked about. Then let's come back and let's try and catch up and get what we wanted in the first place by not doing what we were asked to do in the first place. That's how I view this.
Oh, well, maybe I misquoted by saying that we were supposed to go, this meeting today.
No,
was supposed-
I'm talking about the meeting that we had when we were all freaking out about it last October or September.
No, and that goes back, there was a misunderstanding. You thought that the Woodland Hills thing,
No, no,
we
no.
could all apply that. You just said that.
Well, what we're understanding is that that can't be applied as
All I'm still saying is we still set out a plan to hire one person to do that.
Yeah.
We failed. So now you want me to give you 4 people at which we still might have a miscommunication and we're still a failure.
I don't-
Regardless of if we hire these other 3 people this year, we are not in compliance. We're hiring 4 people, in other words, to make $95,000 per person a year to save the county money. If we hire them, knowing the hiring process, and we hire 4 people throughout the rest of the year, at best, we get $200,000 if there's not a screw up and if there's no lack of communication.
That's true, and I understand.
So
I
who's
see-
coming up with that $200,000?
I think I see where you're going with this. The fact is that we haven't expended it on the personnel, and the expense was going to go somewhere this year. So if we haven't expended it on the personnel, then it has to go to the state.
Right, so my question is, at this point, why don't we plan on paying whatever that max is amount to the state and get ready in September and go through a hiring process and actually set up a program the right way?
You actually made that suggestion to the state when they were here, and his response to you was the state it's not intending, the state has no intention to collect a check from Utah County.
Right.
What they want to see is the work and the production. This meeting today, I intended to be here, was for the one position that we agreed on last year.
Right.
That's what this was for.
We should have had that one position at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, at the beginning of the year.
Because now we're halfway through the year.
And
And
I
we're
don't
losing
argue,
it.
I don't
I mean-
argue that point, that we're taking and building a brand-new program where we have our suppression and everything else programs in place that we have to run.
But that's why we suspended the one meeting and why we ended up meeting in this office was because we let you guys go back and tell us what that program was gonna be and how many people were gonna be here. And you guys outlined what that was going to be. And we said, okay, the commission is willing to take a little flyer. We'll give you the one person. And 7 months later, 7 months from the meeting, not 5 months into this year, 7 months later, we're still at failure. We haven't done anything.
I don't see it as failure. I see that we still have half a year of work. This is the time where I have all my crews in place. This is the time where there's an actual workforce. It wasn't practical to use the jail folks, as you suggested at the last time. They're not trained, they're not qualified, they don't fall under any of our current fire status or even our contracts or MOUs with the state. It's not safe to put them out there in the field doing the things that we do without that training and that responsibility being taken on. I don't have that workforce in January, February, March, April. They're college kids. They work at ski resorts and they're not available up until the first part of May. This is where we're at now. We're trying to go ahead and get this program started. I don't see it as a failure. I see this as actually right on time. Would have been nice to have had this position and all this kind of stuff planned out in January, but even still, I don't have a workforce until now to make these things happen.
This is the time when it mostly comes to fruition.
Right, and that was my understanding from our meeting, was that part of the application now was entering into fire season to make sure we had the workforce that would meet our requirement.
Absolutely correct.
What meeting,
And
what
I have
meeting
no
are we
problem
talking
with that.
about?
I have no problem
We
with
had.
Was there a meeting that I didn't,
I don't know. that
I didn't
we
come
were-
to.
I don't know. that we
This
were-
was a follow-up meeting we had with
It was,
the fire marshal's
we were
office.
meeting with the fire marshal, going over some fire contracts and other stuff, and this come up during the course of that meeting, coordinating on some of the other fire contracts that
I
we've
don't know
been
that you-
going
Well,
with. So,
I
I just have a problem. I'm not.
Lee was, Harvey was there.
I'm not
I-
going to get there on this one. I'm never going to vote for something when we haven't executed the plan we initially started out. I'm not going to reward a plan that we planned on. We budgeted, we went through the process, we met with everybody, and we haven't executed, so now we're gonna reward you with what you asked for, with not what our decision was. I'm just not there.
But the plan
That's
was to
fine.
hire the one person.
The one person. I'm with you on the one person.
And that's
That was
what I-
already approved.
That's what I'm asking for today. Those
Well, it
other,
says-
those other 3 positions were added on by merit. This was a further discussion that was gonna take place.
But I thought we already approved that in the budget.
This is just the approval in the.
I've been tasked and I've been working heavily with personnel to go through this. We experienced similar.
State your name.
Sorry, Jamie Nelson with Utah County Fire. I don't mean to interrupt, but I just want to kind of clarify because
Sure.
I think there's a little miscommunication since I've done kind of a grunt work on this. It seems like we have a job title conundrum the same as the drug task force, or whatever it is. We've been working with personnel for the since January. I have emails rewriting the job description, getting this description and the personnel set up just right, so we can actually have this person titled, labeled, and the scope of work in the place that it needs to be to represent what the actual labors are.
So we didn't hire the wrong person. You said we were that's
We
what
are
they
trying
wanted
to
to.
clean up this last 10 years of scopes that don't match
Understand.
work labor. And so that's been the brunt that we've been doing for the last 5 months, so that when we do roll this position out, it's properly placed with the work.
So then
the
we're
duties
still
and
trying to do
does.
the plan we initially set up in October.
Yes.
And that's been the
With
problem
one
is with
person.
all of this whole new
Yes.
scope. In addition to that, our hand crews have been nonstop for the last month doing handwork in Santa Quinn, Woodland Hills, funding that will count towards this participation match. However, with 25 people on the mountain at 10 hours a day, as much as we possibly can, because we can't bring them on until April to October, those numbers still don't match up. So that was where those original positions we talked.
If we were to continue this so that we could have more discussion on it,
I think that,
and then I would like to see a plan. I'd like to see the plan, even a timeline plan of how this works. That would be very advantageous to me.
That way
I
we
would,
can
I would
get to the
respectfully
377.
ask maybe that we approve the one that we've had to go forward so we can get started on that. We were surprised to see the 4 on here today. We thought you had made the decision to go forward with the plan for all 4 because we hadn't requested that at this time.
Oh.
So when we saw this today, we're going, oh, I
Okay.
guess the commission decided.
Yeah, when I saw
they're
that, I
going
was
to
That's why I was,
implement
I
this
was-
program.
that's what
I
I
was
didn't
shocked.
understand.
Yeah, we did not put on today for 4. We were
Okay.
asking
I
for
should
the
have led
1.
with that, and I
Okay.
apologize.
And that's
So-
why we had this
So
discussion
this is
before the
gonna be
meeting.
my motion.
Okay.
I'm going to then move that we authorize an additional staffing plan for 1 full-time career service captain single resource boss position to the Wildland Fire Division to the Sheriff's Office, with the understanding that we are going to see a plan on how to maintain or meet our threshold of mitigation within 2 weeks, presented to the commission.
that will work. Second.
Okay, I got a motion and a second as amended. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Passes 3-0. All right. Okay, number 19. This one here, I think, I have down here that I need more information. An invoice doesn't tell me anything in the way of the sponsorship, what it's for. We can't get any findings out of an invoice. So I propose that we probably get more information on this and then put it on for next week so that we can see what the sponsorship is, what that, I see it's a $5,000 level, but that it doesn't give me any information.
I could probably tell you everything I think you might want to know today. if you'd like.
Usually when you go through sponsorships, you're sponsoring, it gives you a list of the sponsor stuff, what we're actually doing. Again, I'd like to see it.
Okay.
So you want to continue for a week?
Continue for a week so we can get that on there, that'd be great.
It's not time sensitive, right?
No.
I'll move that we continue regular agenda item 19 for 1 week.
Second?
Got a motion and a second, continue regular agenda item number 19 for 1 week. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes 3-0.
Shocked to see my name on this one, Carl.
Oh. Okay. This one we've kind of gone back and forth with. I know it hit the paper that Utah County's doing. Anyway, if we can just kind of tell a little bit of the history of what is going on here and why we're doing this.
Do you want to take this, Commissioner Graves, or would
Oh,
you
go
like me
ahead.
to? Okay, Carl Hahn, Deputy County Attorney. Utah County and American Fork were looking to install some privy vaults, which, for those who do not know, are outhouses.
Contained
These are
outhouses.
vaulted outhouse, and so it's not an earthen privy. It's got either a fiberglass or a concrete containment. There is county code that restricts privy vaults that was passed in the 50s. The health department has the authority, well, and then there's a state rule that would allow either a vault privy or a earthen privy. The health department, pursuant to state code, has authority to pass any law or any regulation that would be more restrictive than state code, as long as they make findings to do so. And so the health department was interested in allowing privy vaults, but not earthen privies. In order to do that, the health department had to pass a regulation regulating privy vaults, disallowing earthen privies. They did this at the last Board of Health meeting. And now, in order to make these legal in Utah County, the county commission would need to amend the county ordinance, which currently forbids privy vaults.
Yeah, so we had a law from the 50s for the county, law from the state in the 70s that would have changed it. So, being the member from the commission who represents on the Board of Health, the Board of Health, we did take up this. We did do the findings that said no earthen privies because we wanted to protect water resources. American Fork City actually requested a copy before we passed it. It was given to them. Them and their legal counsel looked at it. They showed up, made comments. So did our public works director. I think we worked through those comments. American Fork was very happy. The only thing that still needs to be worked out from the health department's side is they are doing a study to find out how much money it would truly cost to, I don't know the correct term, but clean up the privy vault such time that should happen for a bond. That was the only issue. So they're coming back at the next Board of Health with how much that would really cost. So there's not an arbitrary figure in there. So.
Okay, and I mean, I'm fully on board with doing this. It solves a lot of problems around the county. A couple of questions for you, though, on some of the wording here, and just for understanding purposes. When we're talking about open holes prohibited, and it says open wells, are we gonna find any unintended consequences with that open well?
So what we did,
We're prohibiting open wells? I mean, we have
Yeah.
open wells for water, other things. I'm just wondering if it's gonna cause some problems.
an open well is different than a typical well that you would get water from. And all we did in this amendment was remove the word privy vault from that list. So if it was forbidden before, it's still forbidden except for privy vaults. That's all I've done is copied the exact language that was in before.
In the county code.
And in the county code, and then took out the word privy vault. The only other thing that I modified was I added a little bit of language that would allow the county to come in and to require someone to remove any contaminants that resulted from having a cesspool on their property. The health department has that authority, but I figured, you know, we would have the authority under the county code to force them to fill that in. And it would just be good to clarify, we can also tell them they need to remove the contaminants before they fill it in so they're not just burying a problem. Those were the only changes that were made to the county code.
Okay. So you don't see that as being an unintended consequence later on when it comes to open wells?
No, unless it's been a problem for 60 some odd years.
All right. The rest of it looks fine. That was the only question I had. Any other questions?
I didn't have any.
Okay, motion to be in order.
I'll move that we adopt the ordinance as stated in regular agenda item 24.
Second?
And a motion and a second to adopt the ordinance as stated number 24 on the regular agenda. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
That passes 3-0.
Just a side note, Ralph or Carl, will one of you please reach out to American Fork City, Councilmember Brad Frost? Wanted to make sure if that passed today so that they could get construction there on time constraints for theirs that is leaking. Thank you.
Okay, so now we'll move to number 26, which is approve and adopt a resolution or amend increasing the 2017 Utah County budget.
And Mr. Chairman, what you have before you that I just handed you is the hard copy. You, of course,
Which is
already.
on the electronic one.
Which is on the electronic, but that's just so you have it in front of you.
Okay, we've seen a lot of, we've had a lot of comments on this, or a lot of discussion on this as we've been moving forward, and is there any comments or concerns with the ones that we have in the way of the elections for $500,000? That turned out to be exactly 500,000 still.
Well, there's actually 575 in that pot, because we restricted an additional 75 in case. Which hopefully that covers any unforeseen election.
Okay, how about the Public Works with the 20,000 for the, now this one, just for reference, if we do the work on this, it's quite a savings
Quite a savings.
when it comes to the amount of money if we had them do that, so.
Richard, you want to just address that quickly? Help us understand the savings incurred there?
Sure, this is for fiber optics into the new Fourth District Court. We've been working with the state on that. If we have them do it with their contractors, it's about an $80,000 bill. They are allowing us to come in with our own contractors. We can do it for around 20 and get the same service that the county attorneys and the sheriff's office would like to have in that building. So that's why we're.
We've been trying to
over this
get
way.
for a while, so good
Yes.
job whoever finally got that done.
And then we have a Fusion Splicer. This one's a carryover from last year. We had it in the budget last year, but the product was not actually delivered in this year, and so it did not transfer. I mean, we could have probably transferred it, but we didn't. So there's $9,000 there, and then the Provo City one is with the
Software.
training, whatever you call that, virtual train.
Virtual track
Yep,
software.
that virtual training that goes on there for 13,000. Any discussions on any of them?
Just a quick question, if I might, Commissioner Sheriff Tracy. I'm not sure, based on conversations that have gone back and forth about the jail medical, does that need to be something to be considered on this type, or are there monies that were put
I think we
away?
identified funds for potential transfer if necessary.
We do, we'll have to have more conversation just on, I see one account that's pretty low.
Well, it'll be zeroed this week again. We transferred money into it to.
Which one?
It was the actual medical jail hospital services and that.
Services, that one is, I think the
Right.
other one, medical supplies, is still at 140 or whatever.
Yes,
So we've
but
got,
we transferred some out of that last week to pay what was already being due. And that should be zeroed again probably as soon as those billings go out, I would think, this week. So we're back at zero again, but to empty those others, we're gonna need those at some point down the road too.
yeah, I think
So-
our process so far has been, let's transfer whatever we need to make sure and cover it all and get it down, and then I know we have some monies that we put aside to cover going forward. We don't need to do anything with the budget.
Do you want me to go ahead and to zero out those, the pharmacy and the other medical lines?
Mr.
We'd
Chairman.
like you to zero out the jail legally.
Should go ahead and, as of this morning, there was $140,000 that they could transfer to
Yeah,
cover.
there's, in the medical supplies.
Right, but we will need to expend that for medical
Right.
supplies.
Right.
Yeah, the pharmacy runs 30 to 40,000 a month, so that's what I'm saying, to take those out, somebody's gonna have to replace those funds somewhere.
Right.
And there are monies, then we don't need to worry about the budget increase to
For
find
the
those.
short term, yes, for now.
Okay. I
For,
think-
for today's opening of the budget, yes.
Right, I just, Deneen has told us we can't go into the red with that.
Right.
And so we are out of money in that again. We can transfer the other monies, but then we'll be out of them.
Yeah, I think what Commissioner Lee's saying is after you go through and empty those out, let's sit down, figure out exactly where we're at, what we need, and let's move a dollar figure, and I think we have a solution that might help.
Okay.
Help that. So. I just have one other question on because of the way that the commission requested the HR portion of this be done, is it all in restricted so that it can be pulled out just for this use? Okay.
Yes.
Yes, we have everything on this top sheet, well, we talked about up here
Right.
is all gonna go unrestricted.
Just making sure that was identified. I couldn't remember if we said that to you or just amongst us.
No,
I think
you
it was
did let
just
us know.
this little bit what we had right here.
Yeah, like $500.
That was like $500 that is not, but the
Yeah.
rest of it is.
The rest of it is, correct.
Okay. Any other discussion? Okay, seeing none.
So, this HRIS system needs to save us a lot of money moving forward.
Man,
Get her done, Mark.
That's the discussion.
we're counting on it. That's the reason why we're documenting everything, so we
That's
can
why
see,
we're
right?
documenting this, is because we're spending a little
No
money now
pressure,
to
Mark.
save a lot of money
Your
in the
retirement
future.
is right there. Okay, I'll move then that we approve and adopt the resolution amending an increase to the 2017 Utah County budget as stated in item 2016 on regular agenda, 26 on regular agenda.
Second.
I've got a motion and a second to approve the resolution amending the increase to 2017 Utah County budget as stated number 26 with the exhibits and the resolution in there. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That passes 3-0. Okay, all I have is, I know we need number 27, 29, and 30 on our closed meetings.
Meeting 27, 29, and 30.
Meeting 27, 29, and 30, we can strike number
I'll move
28.
that we strike regular agenda item number 28.
Second?
A motion and a second to strike number 28 from our regular agenda. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Passes 3-0.
Move that we approve and set a date, time, and location for a closed meeting for a strategy session to discuss purchase, exchange, or lease of real property, water rights, or water shares for today's date at this location following the completion of the regular agenda.
Second.
We got a motion and a second to approve and set a date, time, and location as stated in number 27. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
That passes 3-0.
I'll move that we approve and set a date, time, and location for a closed meeting to discuss the character, professional competence, or physical or mental health of an individual or individuals for today's date at this location following the completion of the regular agenda.
Second?
Got a motion and a second to approve and set a date, time, and location for a closed meeting as stated in number 29 on our regular agenda. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
That passes 3-0.
Move that we approve and set a date, time, and location for a closed meeting for a strategy session to discuss pending or reasonably imminent litigation for today's date at this location following the completion of the regular agenda.
Second?
Got a motion and a second to approve and set a date, time, and location as stated in number 30 on our regular agenda. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
That passes 3-0. Okay, we continued the one work session item. And we have number 2, the presentation of the number 2's. Come on up. Maybe as he's coming on up, this we had some public discussion on, or public comment on a few weeks ago. And this is kind of a work session to allow us the opportunity for more conversation back and forth and questions that might come up or be needed. What's your name?
Connor Boyack, president of Libertas Institute, Utah County resident. Is this the point of the meeting where we all stand up and stretch our legs? I think it's been a little while. At least I get to, so thank you for the opportunity. As Commissioner Lee said, this is a continuation of something that's already been presented a few weeks ago. So I'm not going to belabor the point too much, but I think it would be helpful to bring us back up to speed on what that presentation was about and why this proposed resolution is before you. And I'll start by indicating why I'm here and not any of the people who presented in the past. Some of the criticism that's been lodged against this resolution is that it's personal or that it's political, and I think both are unsubstantiated and unfounded. And the reason why I offered to be the one to present this during the work session is that for me, it's neither. And for our organization, this is a concern of good government and making sure that the system is set up in a way that can ensure justice. I have no particular interest in any pending or past case that the Utah County Attorney's Office has reviewed. I'm only lightly familiar with the cases that were presented a few weeks ago. Additionally, I have no ambition for any elected office and have no.
Uh-oh, you just jinxed yourself.
Yeah, well, you can document that and share that online if you want. For me, as I reviewed this when it was presented a few weeks ago, I think this is a profoundly important opportunity. And to convey why, I want to start with a question. And that question for you commissioners as elected officials is, what happens when the justice system becomes a tool of injustice? And more importantly, not what should be done in the abstract about that, what should be done by others, but what is your charge, your duty, and your responsibility as elected officials, especially as those who hold the purse strings for the county and for the county attorney's office in particular. Because for our organization, this is not personal. This isn't even really an issue about the Utah County Attorney's Office per se. That just happens to be the attorney's office within the county that you guys are in charge of. This is something that we would like to see opened up and replicated elsewhere, and I think it's a great opportunity to start that conversation here in Utah County. It's also important to note that prosecutor misconduct, or the allegation thereof, is of significant concern to the public. In one recent poll, 43% of people said that they believe prosecutor misconduct is widespread. This is something that people unfortunately know very little about because, unfortunately, because of government immunity, it's very hard to investigate and litigate allegations of prosecutor misconduct. One story that impacted me, several were shared a few weeks ago, did not happen in Utah, happened in Texas. And I read a book a few years ago about this, having heard previously of the story of a gentleman named Michael Morton. Michael Morton was sentenced to life in prison in the 80s for killing his wife brutally in her bed. They had a child together who was 3 years old. He maintained his innocence, and without any scientific forensic evidence, any witnesses of the sort, he was convicted by a jury and sentenced to life. With the persistent efforts of his attorneys, including those from the Innocence Project, they later found that the prosecutor in that case had intentionally withheld exculpatory evidence. For example, the 3-year-old son had told investigators that dad was not home when that happened. Witnesses indicated that they saw somebody else. These statements never made their way into the proceedings. More importantly, there was a bandana with DNA evidence that was withheld as well. So following some almost 25 years in prison, with the efforts of the Innocence Project, Michael was released. This case, unlike many others like it that the Innocence Center intervenes in, made national and even international news because in Texas there was a system, I believe they call it a court of inquiry, whereby the prosecutor could actually be held accountable, which is something that's actually very rare when cases like this happen. And in that case, the prosecutor was sentenced to 10 days in jail, $500, and 500 hours of community service for sentencing for misconduct that led to the incarceration of an innocent person for a quarter of a century. He got out after 5 days for good behavior. He lost his, he was a judge at the time, he lost his license, he surrendered that as part of the negotiations. So many would look at that in exchange for what he did to another person as a proverbial slap on the wrist. But I want to walk that back because the resolution that's been presented to you has nothing to do with accountability for prosecutors. As important as that is, and that issue is being dealt with separately. For example, we're exploring legislation with several elected officials who are very interested in this, in making sure there are teeth in state law whenever it can be identified and proven that prosecutors have intentionally engaged in misconduct. We empower these prosecutors with a significant amount of authority. In fact, most cases do not make it to a judge or a jury. most cases, the prosecutor becomes the de facto judge. And so in our justice system, those prosecutors become very, very powerful. And where power is given, obviously, there should be accountability and responsibility. But the resolution that's before you, I believe an amended version was given to you that we had some input on editing to soften and amend some of the language. Makes clear that this is not about intervening in any pending investigation. This is not about any type of enforcement or accountability against any prosecutor. So if you have that before you, I'll point you, for example, to in the, therefore be it resolved section, in the second paragraph, it's actually one line. This is one significant change that we felt important to introduce, that the commission may only review and consider allegations pertaining to closed cases that have been fully adjudicated. The intent here is not to try and second guess what prosecutors are currently working on, intervene in a pending case. This is an opportunity for a second bite at the apple for an individual who affirms that they have been wrong because of misconduct. Now, it's been suggested in the press in response to this idea from a few weeks ago that mistakes happen. And I fully concede that prosecutors, as fallible human beings, can and do make mistakes. That's not the concern here. The concern here is actually a very narrow standard with specific criteria of what constitutes misconduct. Because a mistake is fine, but a mistake that goes uncorrected or not dealt with can turn into a habit and a practice and therefore misconduct. So here are some examples of what we're talking about when we say prosecutor misconduct. These can include charging a suspect with more offenses than is actually warranted for the alleged crime, withholding or delaying the release of exculpatory evidence, deliberately mishandling, mistreating, or destroying evidence, allowing witnesses they know or should know are not truthful to testify, pressuring defense witnesses not to testify, relying on fraudulent forensic experts, during plea negotiations, overstating the strength of the evidence, making statements to the media that are designed to arouse public indignation in favor of prosecution, making improper or misleading statements to the jury, or failing to report prosecutor misconduct when it is discovered. So these are serious allegations that, again, are tools of injustice within the justice system. I think as elected officials who've sworn an oath, you have an interest as much as public interest organizations like ours in making sure that our justice system has the integrity required for public support and actually effectuating justice. But again, this is not about going in and intervening in any current cases. What is happening here in this resolution is an opportunity for an individual who alleges that misconduct happened in their case that's already been closed, right? So this is an individual was acquitted or exonerated or a case was dismissed, right? The case is over. Now, from the prosecutor's standpoint, right?
But those are important terms because those are very different. Like that's also a narrow scope. Exonerated, acquitted, you know what I mean? That's a narrow scope too.
Correct, and that's why we felt it was important to include that sentence, that
Okay.
whatever the path was to get to the resolution of the case has been closed,
Okay.
right? So and obviously if there's better legal terminology, right, we consulted with one or two attorneys on that, but if there's something else that would more quickly drive it at what you're talking to, but we felt that a closed case, right, a case can be closed for a variety of reasons. And so the idea here is that if let's use me as an example, let's say I am the subject of prosecutorial misconduct. The deck is stacked against me, right, from day one. I wouldn't qualify for indigent defense. I'd have to pay a significant amount of fees for an attorney to defend myself, whereas prosecution has seemingly unlimited resources as an arm of the state. I maintain my innocence. There is misconduct in my case. And let's say charges are ultimately dismissed. I want to recover those attorney fees. A fundamental principle of our system is that an individual who is innocent should be made whole, right? That's why we have innocence until guilt is proven. But we have an imperfect system where even juries will convict, right, people who are actually innocent. How then can the county, in this case, make an innocent person whole who has been significantly harmed through specific allegations that are identifiable and provable by this commission of prosecutor misconduct? This is a high bar to achieve. This isn't a prosecutor made a mistake, therefore, hey, go write that person a check. There are high standards here to make sure that only when those allegations are proven, what can that individual be made whole. The beauty of this, ideally, as I see it, is this becomes a deterrent, right? Whether we're doing this in Utah County, Davis County, Washington County, wherever, the fact that a commission like this exists itself acts as a deterrent to make sure that the county attorney's office is doing everything in its power, if it already wasn't, to make sure that all of its prosecutions are ethical, legitimate, and that everything is above board and in pursuit of justice and not, for any other reason. And so the mere existence of this commission to look at things on the back end becomes an important deterrent effect to elevate that standard, I think. Another thing that's important to understand in this resolution is that nothing here is final. This commission's sole purpose is an advisory commission to the Utah County Commission. Commissioner Lee, earlier in talking about, I believe it was an HR issue, you said something to the effect of, and I wrote it down, but I'll probably butcher it here. You said, I don't have the time to review, HR cases. You guys are busy, right? And these are serious, weighty issues. The benefit of setting up a formal structure like this outside of your body is that they can spend the time to do the due diligence, to investigate with a balanced makeup of who is on that committee and come back to the commission and say, here's what we found. Take it or leave it. Commissioner, right, you were concerned about not having input at the beginning but of that design or whatever was being discussed, but on the back end, you have ultimate deciding authority. That would be the same with this commission, right? They would not be able to issue any awards. They would not be able to make any final determinations. Their purpose is to help you make sure that within Utah County, justice is being served, something that I think is important and in all of our interests. So if I could go much longer, but I won't, right? Lunchtime is nearing. So if there's any questions, obviously this is a work session. I know the Center for Prosecution Integrity issued a letter, prosecutor integrity, excuse me, in support of this, reaffirming what I had said earlier. They included a quote from former U.S. Attorney General Robert Jackson, who said, "The prosecutor has more control over life, liberty, and reputation than any other person in America. His discretion is tremendous, while the prosecutor at his best is one of the most beneficent forces in our society. When he acts from malice or other base motives, he is one of the worst." We're talking about a significant amount of power in the hands of individuals over whom you can say, well, we have elections and you can,
Which is still true.
Which is theoretically true, but if we look even at the Utah Attorney General's office, right, the subordinates and the culture is often retained even through new elections and new administrations. If we're speaking very frankly, any potential opportunity for needing to correct abuse, elections aren't necessarily a guarantee to solve. You guys hold the purse strings. You guys are elected to oversee the administration of the county. This is an opportunity, we believe, to help you do your jobs better. There's no final determination, financial or otherwise, for this commission. At the end of the day, it's helping you be more informed. And so we would submit that to you for consideration, and obviously here in the work session, I'd be open to any questions you might have about the amended resolution. Thank you.
Walk through some scenarios with me on this so I can kind of get my mind around a little bit too. First off, I had the opportunity to talk with some defense attorneys here in Utah County that are often on the opposite side of the prosecutors, and I asked them point blank, I said, tell me your opinion. Do you think there's a lot of prosecutor misconduct going on? And he said no. He said he didn't think there was. And so I said, okay, that's coming from somebody who's on the other team. Looking at it. And so then I started asking the question, I said, do you think there could be? And he was like, yeah, obviously there can be. And what is this, what should be done or what can be done? So as we walk through this, some of the questions I have are, is this one our role? Is this a role that we should be involved with? Or do we not have the bar that's a part of this? Do we not have the court system that's a part of this? And to a certain extent, the Attorney General's office that deals with this as well. And then for me, as a commissioner, if it is something, as we raised our hand, and we're talking about life, liberty, and property and so forth, and we swear to do that same with everybody within Utah County, and we take that seriously. If it is part of our role, ultimately, what becomes of it? We can't go through and retry a case. We can't go through and we have no authority to do those things. But so we do find it. We do find, or we think, let's say two of us think that there is some sort of misconduct that went on. Then what? So we put it out there in the public, and we say we think that there is some misconduct that goes on. And in essence, what we're doing is we're opening up, for the county, a problem, right? And then as officers of the county, we have maybe a legal issue that's causes some conflict with us as well. As we are the representatives of the people to government, and that should be our first and foremost. We are the representatives of the people to government. And then what is our responsibilities as commissioners as well to protect the integrity of the county
And the funds.
and the funds that are there, rightfully so. And so that balance is really a hard one for me to kind of get over. First off, is there sort of, not that prosecutors are acting like prosecutors, because we want prosecutors to act like prosecutors. And where that line is, where that line for misconduct actually comes into place. And is that something that's definable enough that we can say, line was crossed? But then what after the line is crossed?
Great series of questions. Let me see if I can unpack them enough to adequately respond. But thank you. Those are excellent questions. So it's important to make a distinction. Perhaps I failed in my presentation. There are two issues in play here. One is the accountability for the prosecutor, him or herself, when there has been misconduct. And that is where the bar comes in. That is where the courts come in. That is where a potential lawsuit comes in if you can surpass the, immunity standard, right? There are avenues that we believe should be corrected, but we're separately working with the legislature on those issues. That is not within the realm of this resolution. Okay, so we don't need to necessarily worry about the actual accountability, because you're right, I don't think that is the commission's role. What is being discussed here is making an individual whole who is a resident of your community who has been harmed by the government.
That usually means money.
Correct. And I say this as someone who is probably even more of a fiscal hawk than any of you three, but we can discuss after and arm wrestle if you want to go for that. Paying somebody who has been harmed is a tough sell, right? Because you are fiduciary.
Can I
Please.
add that? Paying somebody what they feel it's worth is the tough sell. Paying somebody is not necessarily a tough sell.
Sure, and that's a determination that you would be able to make. If this commission were to recommend, X, and you want to do X divided by 5, fine. For my interest, it's not even so much about the money; it's about the recognition that harm has been done, right? And if you award $10, there's still an implicit psychological effect that's carried there, that there's a recognition that there was a problem here. So really what this becomes is a political opportunity at the end of the day. If the commission says, look, we think there was misconduct, the evidence is sufficient to show that the standard has been achieved, that yes, there is misconduct, a couple things can happen. One is you guys could recommend that information, that formal report, to a prosecuting or law enforcement agency for investigation. Give it to the Attorney General's office and say, you may want to look at this. There may need to be some repercussions for any misconduct. I don't know that there ever has been any. Again, for me, this is not personal with any of those previous cases that were discussed. Maybe
That
there
assumes
has.
that office will ever listen to any complaint.
Well, that's another discussion for another day. But you could refer the information for prosecution to authorities, right? You would have a formal report. You can hand it off and say, here you go, do with it as you please. That's within your separate charge. But this commission would then be able to say, look, as elected officials, it is within our purview and our jurisdiction to, yes, give an award where significant loss has been incurred. For these cases that may be wrongly tried or trumped up on the charges or wrongly appealed or whatever, where is the concern? I would ask for spending those taxpayer funds in a prosecution that should not happen, right? Do those deliberations happen? Is that concern expressed, or is there free rein to just spend whatever the prosecution thinks is needed? There has to be a check on that, because I agree that money is important. And so when you look at the size of a county attorney's budget, when you look at the costs of all of that litigation in which there may be some misconduct occurring, if we're going to apply a standard of concern over how that money is spent, I think it has to be equal. And because there is less concern and review in that process and within that office, I think having a small funded commission to simply inform the commission, help make sure that balance is being achieved, is reasonable. Again, this commission would not be able to go and award $100,000 to any individual. At best, they come to you and say, hey, we think the cause of justice is served by you making this award. You could dock it down to 20 and say, there you go, be on your way. But at the end of the day, the purpose of this commission is to try and remedy an injustice, to try and make an individual whole. And at the end of the day, that comes out to money. When someone has had to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to fight an injustice of their own money, yeah, taxpayers should be on the hook, because taxpayers employ and elect the individuals who perpetrated that injustice. Again, I don't know that that's happened. Maybe it will never happen, right? Maybe this commission meets quarterly for a few years and doesn't find anything, and then we can review it on a sunset in 2 or 3 years and say, it was a nice idea, but things are, tip-top shape and we're all good. But the fact that it can happen at all, and when you look at the Innocence Project and you look at some of the stories that were presented before, there's Blackstone law that better that 10 guilty people go free than that one innocent individual be punished. This is the cornerstone of our entire system of justice, and I would just ask you to consider, what is the check and balance? Is an election of the top individual sufficient balance for everything that happens 365 days of the year with everyone below? Or what opportunity is there to add an additional check? Again, just a review process, nothing binding, nothing explicit, but just to empower you to better understand what may or may not be happening.
So, and jump in, anybody else, but, so if, this was posed to me too as a question. If we're doing this for one elected official, being the county attorney's office, should we do the same thing for the sheriff's office and for the clerk auditor's office? In the way
Our
of,
office.
for our office? Should we
No.
set up all these commissions, to do the same? I mean, I think it's a legitimate question. And where's the checks and balances with that?
Great question. And I will quote that sage advice that comes from the movie Spider-Man, right? Where much,
Which
I'm
version?
gonna butcher it now. What was it? It was, where there's power, there's responsibility, or what, I put myself on the spot and I forgot. The point,
Somebody will correct you
So
online.
can I,
I'll get a tweet here in a
so
minute.
a couple of the other issues why you think of that have bothered me with this is, I don't disagree with, again, the concept. There is potential for anything, again, because everybody's a flawed human being. That's my belief. Part of the problem is you want people in this county to potentially oversee, and we all come with biases. See, so to me, a best way to set up the system is, okay, we find a sister county, Massachusetts, I don't know, wherever, right? They review your cases, and then we review their cases, type of thing, so that there are no personal biases, you know what I mean? So you get a truly, the most objective look you possibly can. The other problem is when you say, do we hold one person responsible for the election? When you're working on a legislative fix, and this is one that bothers me that I've learned since I've been here, is if the legislature wants to make one election matter so that that person who is representative of the people can actually have effect, the legislature ought to address the merit system, because the problem is the legislature has set up a system in which a person can make multiple errors costing multiple hundreds of thousands of taxpayer dollars and still have a job and a retirement with no recourse.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, and I think that gets to the underlying point that why not do other offices, for example? When you look at the power of a prosecutor, it is staggering and substantial compared to any of the other positions you mentioned. I think the best analogy that we have so far is citizen review boards for police, right, when there's shootings. Several agencies, especially around the country, have set up these external reviews to say, look, because of the amount of force used in this case, we just want to have an outside perspective to come in and take a look at this, right? The power of a law enforcement official to end a person's life, in this case, suggests the need for an additional check and additional accountability. The power of a prosecutor to disrupt and in some cases destroy a person's life is staggering and substantial, right? And so where much power is given, we need that extra layer of responsibility and accountability. So again, the question for you, maybe this resolution isn't the answer, right? I'm not married to 100% of the text in this, and this is the manna from heaven, and here we go, we're going to implement it. The question for us at the end of the day, or really for you, is do you feel that things are adequate? Do you feel there is a check? Are you confident that any injustice that's occurring, that the people whose lives have been disrupted or destroyed are being made whole? Right? Is an apology sufficient if and when an apology ever, in fact, comes from a wrongful prosecution? Is that just, oh, shucks, collateral damage from our system? Or is there an opportunity to actually effectuate justice and try and remedy these situations?
Sure, but I think publicly, I think people also need to understand that there is such a thing as a it's not prosecutorial misconduct to take something to trial. The evidence may be there, and you still may be acquitted. That in and of itself does not make, and I think sometimes some of the public blurs that line, again, not understanding fully the concept, because that's not what you're talking about, but some do sometimes blur that line, and that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about true misconduct where they intentionally go to harm someone.
And how great would it be for an individual in that case who is acquitted to come before this commission and make their case, and the commission to say, no, you're acquitted, but that was a fair prosecution, that doesn't reach this level. And then the message of legitimacy that comes through the media, through public meetings, to say, no, that was an upstanding prosecution. Stuff like this, as I see it, these external checks validate good behavior. This isn't an inquisition against the prosecution, right? This is not to try and go and punish people. Any good prosecutor should not, in my opinion, fear any oversight or external checks and balances like this, right? Because good prosecutors are going to be able to stand by what they've done and be able to point to a legitimate, fair prosecution. This just helps act as a disincentive for anything that doesn't meet that standard.
So I'm going to ask you a real hard question, Connor. So
It's not the Spider-Man quote because it's still not coming to me. Go ahead.
There's a million great ideas out there.
Yeah.
And there's always one hidden question, and that's how do you pay for this?
Mm-hmm.
As a county, we're incredibly fiscally lean. I have an understaffed sheriff's department that probably may or may not need raises. I've got a jail that is, we're trying to work through some criminal justice reform, which is phenomenal, that I 100% support. Unfortunately, the state hasn't been supportive in shipping me money to do that, so that's put a great amount of strain on our budgets there. We have a dying public works facility, and I'm not trying to make excuses. I'm just saying when we look at this, so how do we pay for this? What would your thoughts be on mechanisms for revenue? Because again, I am very open to this idea. This is a very personal subject to me. It's concerning, and I want to make sure we get this right when we do it. But one of the unanswered questions I have is how do we pay for it? And I think part of it is the commission itself, right? What does the financing of that look like? And then two, should they come back with a finding to us that we believe is accurate, like how do we come up with the 500,000 in restoration or whatever it might be?
Popular.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that's
super important question.
I think it's a nut and bolts, but it has to be discussed as to if we think this is a legit thing, how do we pay for it?
Great questions. Think there's an ice skating rink that could provide some money? Or no, okay.
Yes.
There's a lot of people that want to buy an asset that's worth a lot more than it makes out there, right?
So at the end of the day, this whole proposition is about money, to be fair, right?
Yeah.
And so it's a great question. What I would suggest to you is that this commission could be extremely inexpensive, if not at no cost. I mean, most of these people would be volunteer. At best, you're paying a director per diem or part-time. I don't foresee, and frankly, that would be at your discretion. I don't know all the fiscal or legal implications of this, but to my knowledge, this could be set up at no cost. You find people who are willing to serve, who again can meet, one day per quarter, and off they go, and that's it. This is not going to be a full-time, all-day, every-day type of thing. So I see the commission as being a very minimal cost. And especially when you look at what is allocated to the prosecution's office, taking a very small sliver, very, very small sliver of that to ensure that all of that money you're allocated to that office is being used prudently and in the cause of justice seems to me to be very plausible and reasonable, especially if we're talking, at best 5 figures to fund and constitute the commission. Perhaps the more important question is, what if this commission, once constituted, comes back with a finding that you as a commission agree with, and you see someone who has been wronged. From what I understand, and I'm not an expert here, so you'll want to consult, I believe that one of the supporters talked to someone in county staff who said that you could get riders on the insurance such that if a finding was ever made and a payout ever had to occur, as authorized by the county commission, that insurance would cover that based on the policy that you have. So that wouldn't come out just explicitly out of your annual budget. You would be insured for a damage award such
Again,
as
those
that.
riders cost money, and to carry that if there's no misconduct is an
And that would be a
expense to
great
taxpayer
question for you to understand in furtherance of consideration of this proposal, is to inquire about it and say, well, if we were to get that rider to approve this, how much would that be? And then make that financial determination. But again, I certainly understand that public works and all sorts of things are aging and in need of repair and upgrade. At the end of the day, we're talking about the potential for disruption and even destruction of a person's life.
Right, and I in no way meant to suggest that those were more important, because life is far important, and this is an issue where we're discussing life, and so I was just illustrating there
Sure.
that,
There's
as a
competing
county,
interests.
as a county, we have a fairly strapped budget, right? And so we have to make sure that we have, to do something right, we need to make sure we have the funding there to
Absolutely.
make sure it happens. And that's why I asked the question. And I certainly, in no instance, think a snowplow is more important than restitution or making someone whole. I don't want to
Yeah.
infer that
Thank
at
you.
all. But I think it's part of the question for me is I've tried to work through this. How do we get to some type of an end goal here? That's one of the questions a hurdle I haven't been able to overcome as I've looked at our budgets that we just had to
Absolutely.
open up again today. How do we overcome some of those hurdles?
Yeah, and I would appreciate it if the commission would be able to facilitate finding out that fiscal impact with the insurance, because I think that would be important to
And
understand
that's
before
a good
deciding on
place
this.
to look.
I'm going to start with your opening statement. You says, what happens when the justice systems become an injustice? I don't think there's anybody out there, and I know in some cases it seems like we're narrowing in on one part of the justice system. There's a lot more than just this one part to the justice system. So how far does it go? How far does it reach? Where does it go from there? But the justice system, the reason why it's called justice is because we're looking for justice on both sides, equal justice under the laws that we have set up. And that's important for all of us, because who wants to go down the street feeling like you've got injustice going on, or you might be the victim of injustice, or anything that might happen where you can find problems or problematic, where it just turns right around and comes back to us all the time. So I like that statement, where we find that balance so that we can actually have a stamp and say we feel like our justice system here in Utah County is one of the best in the world or the country or whatever. That'd be great to have. We always talk about number one economically. I mean, how about we say things like we're number one when it comes to the most freedom in the country or the world, or we're number one when it comes to less regulations that are happening to the business environment, and we also consider ourselves number one when it comes to the justice system, and that there is a balance. I think those are important for all of us to look at and say, where is it? But how we get to that point without creating injustice on the other side as well is the trick.
Absolutely. And the final thing I would suggest too is I think it appears that the idea has merit from the commission. I think we do need to review the fiscal impact before you can really fairly make a determination about it. Another thing to suggest too is as I suggested during my remarks, you could put a sunset on this to be able to come back and formally review what the commission has done, the merits of the commission, the fiscal impact, and make a determination if it's something you want to continue with. So by no means is this a, stone tablets, you have to do this for the next several decades. I think it would be good to have an ongoing review.
Right. Quick question. On the Court of Inquiry in Texas, something I've made a note on to look more into. Are you aware, was that something that was instituted through the courts? Was it a state legislative measure? Did it originate in a county? Do you know how that came
I've
into
not looked
being?
into the history of it. And to my knowledge, it's fairly infrequent among states that have a process like that for that type of review. So that's something we're looking into for the state, but separate from
Right, and that's, I was just curious as how that.
I don't know.
Sounds like a great thing, and I've got a note to look into it more myself, but I was just curious if you knew where that had originated.
Thanks.
Any
Thank you.
other, I mean, this is a work session. Are there any others that would like to? Sure.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Tim Taylor from the Utah County Attorney's Office. I just want to touch on a few things. I know that I've spoken individually with you, so I don't want to hit over everything that I've gone over before, but one of the questions that I ask myself is, you know what, is this really something that's needed, or is this a solution in search of a problem? When you look at the County Attorney's Office, we receive about 3,500 cases per year, felony cases per year, not our justice court. And so those are cases that we're screening. So over the last 10 years, since this administration, there's been about 35,000 cases that have come through our office. Some of the things that the county or the public never sees are the hundreds of cases that we decline right up front, where we say, you know what, there's just not enough here, or there was a mistake or something like that. So those will never see the light of day. The standard that we try to utilize in our office is there a reasonable likelihood of success if we go to trial? Not just is there probable cause. Now, minds can differ as to whether or not we make the right call, whether or not we think there's enough evidence there. But one of the things also that I think is important for the commissioners to realize, and I think that you do, is that when cases progress, when cases from when they come into our office until that case ends up in trial, this case could go on for a year or two. You have witnesses who forget, you have evidence that may get stronger or may get weaker, you may have, additional information. And so the cases, always, they aren't just static, they are dynamic. And I think that what we try to do is we try to, make the best judgment calls we can. One of the things that has been talked about is, are there other oversights with regards to the county attorney's office, and not just our attorney's office, but with regards to all prosecutors throughout the state. And as been mentioned, there is the Utah State Bar. I looked at the amount that they are budgeting, I think, this year for conduct, their conduct commission that will look into allegations of misconduct by attorneys. The whole gamut, it's about $1.5 million. So they have quite a robust budget for individuals to go ahead and make complaints. And one of the things that's really important to know that individuals who make complaints against a prosecutor or some other type of attorney, that isn't subject to any immunity sort of allegation. They can go ahead and find that there has been some sort of misconduct, and immunity doesn't apply. The only time that immunity really applies is in the court system, is when you go ahead and you sue a county or a prosecutor. And the prosecutors, normally if you're in the course of your job, you're going to have absolute immunity. Commissioners, you have immunity. Elected officials and other people who in government who are working in the course of their job description have that immunity, and we want that type of immunity. The immunity that has been litigated and looked at, and there has been a lot of precedent set throughout the United States, both in state and federal courts, that's a really important aspect. And I hope that you wouldn't be too quick to say, you know what, we're ready to pierce that immunity veil, and we're ready to hold individuals accountable, because once you start to do that, then you're going to have people second guessing with regards to, you know what, am I going to be scared to do this? I think that there's no problem. Like Mr. Boyack says, I don't have a problem if someone wants to come and look at the cases that I prosecute. I have no problem with that. I think that I can go ahead and distill upon them the reasons as to why I think that I can prove beyond a reasonable doubt that this is happening. But when you have an attorney who's saying, you know what, I'm afraid that every time I make a decision, I'm going to be sued. You don't want that. Now, you want to have, I'm not sure that you want aggressive attorneys. You want attorneys who want to seek justice and hold people accountable for the wrongs that they've committed. And I think that Commissioner Graves hit it right on the head, that there are times that when you put forth all of your evidence, that you're still going to come up with an acquittal. Doesn't mean that we've done something wrong. It just means that the jury has looked at something different. And they looked at it differently than we did, and that's fine. Another tool that we have with regards to keeping us in check.
Ask you one question, sorry
Yes,
to
sir.
jump in. You talk about immunity. I mean, I don't know if I feel that immunity. I was sued recently,
Yeah, I know.
personally.
Pardon me?
So I was sued recently, personally.
By
As your
another
po-
government
by no-
entity.
As your
fulfilling-
position.
Fulfilling my responsibilities. I don't know if, so the immunity part doesn't really strike us. So anyway, but going back to, I don't, conduct is conduct. I think there's a separation line between conduct and then misconduct.
Sure.
And you would agree that there could be misconduct, I would hope.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I think that's the distinction is conduct to misconduct and where that line is. And if that's defined, then it would seem reasonable that if you're doing your job and you're doing the conduct of a prosecutor or a law enforcement officer and you're within your protocol, then you're doing your job. And I don't know how we could ever say that you're out of bounds. But once you cross the line, I can cross the line as a commissioner. I don't have total immunity. I can't go out there and do whatever on the streets. I mean, there are certain things that we all have lines. And so I'm wondering where the line is, maybe from your mind on conduct and misconduct.
Sure. So if we participate in misconduct, we lose our immunity. So the courts have already stated that.
Who determines that? The courts,
So
the bar,
Well, the courts, when you look at the precedent that have been set with regards to, is there absolute immunity or is there qualified immunity? Or have you stepped so far outside of your responsibilities that you have no immunity whatsoever? The courts have already laid out those tests, which is, I think is, very strong precedent, that that the prosecutor can be held personally
Yeah,
responsible
but who
for that.
reviews that?
Who reviews that?
Yes.
The courts.
Okay, so
every case?
No, what, if someone sued, say for example, that I withheld evidence, okay? And that in Mr. Boyak's example, that I withheld evidence and the individual was convicted. And then it was discovered later on that I actually withheld that evidence. I would not have that immunity available to me. So if that person that
So
I
if the court
prosecuted.
comes and requests a grammar request, so we've had grammar requests where work product you guys have tried to protect work product. And I understand why, because that is one of the protected issues of
It
grammar.
is. Mhm.
But in a case of misconduct, is there anything that would be protected going to the judge, or would he get everything the county has?
Including our notes and stuff like that?
Yes, I'm talking 100% of everything, because again, to truly investigate a misconduct, not conduct, right? Misconduct.
Sure.
If we claim, oh, this is work product and this is work product, and we hide and we withhold, again, that's what they're saying. How do we protect against that? So what I'm asking you is, when a judge or somebody sues, so again, in this hypothetical, you get sued, does the judge, when he reviews it, do we still get to withhold as work product, or do we have to turn over everything?
So, if someone sued me and I claimed that I had notes that were work product and stuff like that, that the defense attorney who was suing me could say, you know what, I need those notes. Those are important to my case. Then the judge would go ahead and make that call. And if the judge says, you know what, Tim, you've got to turn over those notes, then absolutely I turn it over. And so we could be ordered absolutely to turn over everything that we have. Does that answer your question? Okay. One of the things that I think is also very important, that often gets overlooked, is with regards to the checks and balances of defense attorneys. So there's two parties to this case. There's not just a rogue prosecutor out there. There's a defense attorney who is working extremely hard on behalf of his or her client. And so that right there in and of itself, you know what, we're going to disagree. We're gonna have disagreements as to, how maybe the process should go forward. But the defense attorney is always eligible to say, you know what, I think that I need this, and the judge can go ahead and make that decision. Sometimes there are just legitimate disagreements, but I can tell you our office policy, and we put on every discovery letter that we send out to defense counsel, says we have an open file policy. Anything that we have from the police, you get it. No questions asked. And we send it out to them. They don't even have to ask for it. We send that out to them. So there isn't anything other than maybe if we have some notes in preparation for trial, whatever the case may be, we do not keep anything back. When you look at those 35,000 cases that we've handled over the last 10 years, I looked at how many cases have gone up on appeal to the Utah Court of Appeals or to the Utah Supreme Court where there has been allegations of prosecutorial misconduct. There were 7 in the last 10 years. In one of those cases, the judge found, you know what, and I think that I've even expressed that to the commissioners. It wasn't even brought up by any of the individuals who were for asking for this. What happened is our attorney, his first felony trial, he had a witness on the stand, and that witness was a co-defendant. That co-defendant was in prison. She was sent up on prison on a first-degree felony. Well, at the time, back then, we had something that's called a super first, where instead of it being a 5 to life sentence, it was a mandatory 3 to life. She had to spend 3 years. And when she was asked by defense counsel, did you receive any benefit for your testimony today? She said, I didn't get anything from this. Well, that young prosecutor, he knew that, well, she went up on a first-degree felony, but there was a difference. And he didn't say anything right away. It came out during the course of that trial. But at the end of that trial, defense counsel said, you know what, that prosecutor should be held responsible. And the judge says, you know what, Mr. Prosecutor, you should have spoken up a little bit sooner, and you didn't. And so, however, the judge says, you know what, that was a harmless error. And so it went up to the Court of Appeals, and the Court of Appeals said the same thing, said, you know what, Mr. Prosecutor, you should have spoken up, but still it's harmless error. So when you look at the 35,000 cases that we have done, and all the cases that have gone up on appeal, in the 7 cases that have gone up on appeal with regards to allegations of prosecutorial misconduct, not one single case has been overturned by stating, you know what, the prosecutor messed up here. So when you look at whether or not this commission is really needed, I think that looking at the track record and the past history of this is also important. One of the things that was brought up by Mr. Boyack and with regards to the Attorney General's office is that the Attorney General's office, they do receive complaints. And since I am the chief deputy in the office, I work with one of their chief deputies up there, and whenever they have a complaint in our office, he will give me a call and say, you know what, we have received a complaint. Will you give us this entire case file to review? Absolutely. we'll give them the entire case file. They'll look at it. And in all the years that I have been the chief deputy, they have never found once that we have done anything wrong with regards to prosecutorial misconduct. Now, whatever standard, you may think that, oh, we're all good buddies and stuff like that, but you know, quite honestly, I think that they take their job seriously. We also have, like I said, the state bar, the federal courts, the AG's office. Just gonna skip through. Oh, one of the things that I did want to mention that, and I'm glad that Mr. Boyack brought this up. I think one of the most damaging things that a prosecutor can do is to hold back evidence that they may have in their possession. And so after this case, where this attorney didn't disclose about that plea deal, we went ahead and we put together a form that, this is a disclosure document, that anybody who is going to trial in our office, that they have to sit down with the police officer at the police station and with the evidence technician and go through every bit of evidence, and we check off and we make sure that we have given them everything we have. These are the efforts. I don't know that any other attorney's office in the state uses this sort of measure, but one of the things that we've done is we want to make sure that that defense counsel has everything, because one of the things that you may or may not know is that we are deemed to have the information in our possession even though we don't know about it. If there is a document sitting at a police station and we don't know about it, we are deemed to still be in our possession. So if we don't turn that over, that can be withholding evidence. And so that's one of the reasons we thought it was very important for us.
So, I guess the question, cases that go to trial, I think, are pretty easy to prove or not have a very high threshold of showing there's no misconduct.
Okay.
I think that kind of bears itself out, and there's so much evidence that is public that most of the time that happens. Not saying it can't, I'm just saying it's my opinion. The problem I have, and I think this goes back to more of what Connor was talking about, is the checks and balances in the system is, if there's a guilty plea, nobody reviews them because they assume, oh, well, they've admitted to guilt.
Okay.
But the reality is where the misconduct can potentially be in there is you sit in a room and somebody who's a first offender thinks, oh my gosh, all of a sudden I swerved across over the line and I was driving in a construction area and now they've got me for reckless driving, they got me for this, they got me, and all of a sudden they've upped all these charges, and if you don't plead, you're gonna go to jail for 5 days. Well, that is a scary thought for a lot of people. So.
It is.
Again, it's easy to highlight these murder cases or stuff like this, right?
Sure.
All the datelines.
Yeah.
Because they make for great TV episodes. But the reality is the 35,000 cases, how many of those are pled out? Probably 90%. So if I'm guessing 30,000 of them, probably.
At least.
At least. Of which they get a guilty plea. And so therefore we don't necessarily evaluate it and we just go ahead and say, okay, well, did we overcharge him? And I mean, you know, over or undercharge, because, you know, I would dare say that, to me, a look back can work both ways, because as you're aware, I think there are times that potentially we underplea, and we should not take a plea, and we should give a much harsher sentence, you know, because again, the justice that works both ways is what you guys are there is to protect the public as well and keep some of those offenders from violating. And, you know, for somebody who has been murdered, raped, the big ones, or even small theft, how do you make them whole? Some things you know, 60 days in jail, 30 days in jail, 10 days in jail, counseling, those don't necessarily make you whole.
How could you make them whole, I guess, if they pled guilty?
And that's my
Yeah.
question,
Yeah.
is how do you review the guilty plea? Because you're never going to go back and look at those because, well, they admitted guilt. Well, did they admit guilt because, well, you brought them in on this, this, and this, you know, and all of a sudden it's like, well, yeah, if that's my option, you know, this door over here, I can, you know, have my sentence, you know, probated, and here's $1,000.
Sure. I think that one of the things that obviously that I had hoped that you would also trust is the defense attorneys, that they are out there working really hard for their clients, and they're not going to let us, you know, go forward on, you know, frivolous sort of charges. And you know what? We're going to get challenged, and there's times that we get challenged, and you know what? We don't win. Okay, and that's the way our system works, though. But I want you to know from the chief deputy's position in our office is that if I have someone come and review a case with me, and I'll tell you, that's what I spend most of my day doing, is reviewing cases. People come talk to me about their cases. If they feel like that person, if they have a question whether or not that person committed the crime, then they need to seriously take a look at dumping that case. Because if we don't have that feeling, if we don't feel like that, you know, that person committed that crime, we need to get rid of them. We need to our job isn't just to put people away. Our job really is to try and do the right thing. Now, do we get it wrong sometimes? Absolutely we do. You know, but I tell you what, I think from the mistakes that we've made, we try to improve. And so that's what we're trying to do.
Quick question for you. As we mentioned earlier, when we visited privately, I mentioned this was an important issue to me.
Yes.
Personally, it was my first sleepless night as an elected official, because lives literally hang in the balance here, and I feel that this is a policy that we have to get right.
Okay.
Because of the fact that it affects lives. One of the things that was brought up that I find interesting is this concept that 43% of the public feel that there's widespread misconduct. That's an alarming number, right? So we have to step back and say, why is that number so high? And what aren't we doing in forms of checks and balances to create public confidence in the system? From your perspective, what can we do or implement to help put better checks and balances in the system and to help the public understand, you know, what's happening there?
Well, I think one of the biggest things that I see out there is that the public just does not have the information that's available to the prosecutor or defense counsel. And so when this group came up and they cited several of their examples, I shared with you maybe some of the rest of the story. And when I share some of the rest of the story, maybe it's like, oh, okay, well, I didn't know that. Well, that information would have been important to me. So one of the things, the tools that I think that we can do a better job is with regards to our website that we have. We put, with regards to certain cases that we're prosecuting out there and stuff like that, we can do a better job at communicating and providing a better a more rounded version of what's going on there. I think that when people understand that the information that we may have is not necessarily what you're reading in the paper, and we see that all the time, even in cases that I prosecute, when I will read a write-up in the paper, you know, you just can't get it all in there. And so I think, Commissioner, I think one of the things that we can do better is communicating better with regards to, you know, the cases. One of the things that I would also ask is that, I know Mr. Stanley stood up here and he said that he's received several calls with regards to individuals who have, you know, felt that they've been wrongly prosecuted. You know what, I've never received a call saying, Tim, there's one of my constituents. Can you talk to me a little bit about this case? I would love that. My door is always open, and you know what, and our prosecutors, I hope that they would feel the same. And so I think the communication, Commissioner, is one way that we can help to improve that. That 43%, that is quite an alarming number. But quite honestly, I'm not surprised by that number, because the information that they received, when we have a case that's 500 to 1,000 pages long in documents, and they get 2 paragraphs in a newspaper, there's going to be some disconnect there. And so, but obviously, you know, we would be open to ways that, you know, that we can do a better job at communicating. And I think that that could be helpful to the public too. Does that answer your question?
You know, I have received those phone calls since we've started this. A number of people have called me, asking questions and concerned about and telling me their story. And it's really hard for me to try to weigh it, because you can't, if you don't have all the information, you can't weigh it. So I understand it's one-sided perspective. But a lot of them do get down to what happens when ultimately I'm found innocent, or because a couple of them that called me, and I feel for them, they and I won't go over the details with it, but they
Sure.
say, you know, there was this charge, this charge, this charge, and all these charges that were put into this thing, and that hits the paper, or it hits the local area, and then all of a sudden they're found innocent. But nevertheless, we live in an age in which it lives forever on these things.
It does.
And yet now an individual that I was speaking to says, now I'm going out there and I'm trying to get a job, and they Google me, or they look at something and it pops up. And I feel for them. They're, you know, I feel for them when one incident, I'll just put it this way. When I was a kid, I lived in a different world. There are things that I did that, you know, and I'm not saying they're really wrong stuff, but kid stuff,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
That if somebody would have taken that to a court, they could have put on there whatever. You list it, you know, from firecrackers, and they can take it to wherever, to, you know, I mean, it can go down a lot. Well, they could probably list a lot of people nowadays and call them terrorists, just because they're doing whatever.
Dry ice bombs.
Dry ice bombs, you know, I mean, those things, the things that when I was a kid, that, you know, people would just say, knock it off, you know, knucklehead, stop it. But nowadays, you know, if a prosecutor was to get a hold of that, you could list them as, you know, from kidnapping charges to terrorist charges, and those things follow and live forever on the internet. And I feel for them in that situation, because I see that reflection in myself and say, whoa, wow. Now, what happens if that would have happened when I was a kid too, and now all of a sudden this person has to live with their life? I don't know where the balance is. I want to ask you this question though.
Yes.
So, and I appreciate the fact that you have this document that you're going down through and checking the boxes off with it. It's possible that your office could have this commission itself on a review basis. Maybe you do. and it's subject to have some teeth in it to the point to where, you know, if there's misconduct going on, you could label these things, and it's like Commissioner Graves was saying, hey, we can't afford to have this stuff happen in our office, and if it continues to go down this path, we're gonna let you go. We have to write you up for this, because this is
Absolutely.
not what.
We wouldn't want them in our office.
You wouldn't want them in
No
our
way.
office, but nevertheless, there are some people, I've heard over and over, and again, allegations of things going on that which maybe they should have been written up, and they should have been looked at in the sense of, finding a different job or going in a different direction.
Commissioner, maybe they were written up, but we don't share that. And so we don't.
And that's why I'd like to fix the merit system, because quite honestly, I'll say this on the record, that I've shared with you guys, because again, if anybody's dumb enough to say this in a public setting, then you're dumb enough to probably be ousted, and I won't say names. But I've heard 2 individuals in your office break confidences that I've come directly to you guys about, that in my opinion, and this is the world according to Greg, I'd have fired them on the spot. I'd have fired them without even a hesitation. And that's the problem for me in my job, is I then have their direct supervisors come to me and ask for more money to help do stuff like this, and I know it's still in the public's best interest, but the reality is we are flawed individuals. I know I say stuff, but I'm accountable for everything I've ever said or done, and trust me, I'm always the one ridiculed the most. Yet these people get hidden, and they're public employees paid with public taxpaying dollars, and then we hide the fact that they were written up. And heaven forbid, for the next 30 years, they're still going to get a retirement while they screw people's lives over. They make people feel like crap. They demean other people. They do not do the county's best interest. And that is a problem.
I can tell you that when misconduct rises to a level that, we have guidelines. You have the oral reprimand, you have the written reprimand, you have, suspension, those sort of things. I'll tell you, we talk with our council a lot with regards to, whether or not, I shouldn't say a lot, but we talk to our council that in those instances, what can we do? And I think that what we're trying to do is that we're trying to impose the harshest sanction, the most serious sanction that we can under our guidelines. And so, I understand.
This has always been my real problem with attorneys. This is why a commission of attorneys bothers me, because
Yeah.
Our civil division are some of the greatest people I know. They really are. But there are 7 people with 7 vastly different opinions on reading the same law. If you don't get them all in the same room together where they can get a consensus, and you go room by room, they'll be like, I think it says this, or I think, and again, they're not unlike every other attorney in the world. And so that's the problem. But there are harsher guidelines. We've always taken the approach in this county to be on the softer side of the guidelines. And there are guidelines that I think we can enact and be harsher. And people here should fear their jobs when they're not serving the public or their best interests, period. I don't think you're entitled to a job, yet I'm on record. I would dare say the vast majority of this county thinks they are entitled to their job.
Before I came on as chief deputy, I'm not sure how many people were dismissed in our office, but since I've been there, there have been several. And I don't take that with
Now,
any.
there should be 2 more.
I don't take that with any pleasure or pride, but what I say is that I think that I really try, and I think that Mr. Buman also tries to take this seriously, that, you know what, if you are acting inappropriately, if there is, misconduct, your job is on the line. You do not have, this eternal right to this job, and you won't. Just last thing, if I could say, with regards to the other checks and balances, one of the things that we do in our office is that we have a screening team that screens all of our felony cases. And so when those cases are screened and the charges are filed, then those charges are given to a different attorney, a new set of eyes, to try and go ahead and make sure that, so we do have that little checks and balances. It's not the same person who's filing the charges and then handling the cases. Now, our sex crimes are a little bit different. That is the way that handles, just because of, we're in front of 10 different judges, and we only have 4 people on our SVU team. But in addition to that, and I think that I've conveyed this before, is that every single case that's gonna go to trial, before it can go to trial in our office, we have to moot that amongst all of the attorneys in our office. And I'll tell you what, there have been cases when they have mooted those cases in front of us that we said, you know what, you don't got this. you need to figure out a way to dump this or something. I don't think that you're gonna be able to succeed. And so they take that criticism, I think, and looked at their cases, and sometimes they've just outright dismissed them. Sometimes we get that tunnel vision, we kind of get focused, and I think that's a good thing for us to have that moot opportunity where we look at all of our cases that go to trial. And so.
Can I ask you one more
Yes,
question?
sir.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, just because it feels like I beat up on you, so I do want to also say that you and Jeff have been absolutely open, and I appreciate you, and I do consider both of you friends and people of integrity. I just disagree with you on this
Thank you.
issue with those two people.
And thank you.
So, with what you said so far and the things that you're trying to accomplish and so forth, then a commission like this shouldn't scare you at all then, because everything's going down the right path. If that's the case, then would you be willing to entertain and look at everything that's possibly out there and say, maybe what should we do?
You know what? I am a very firm believer that if I'm not doing the best job that I can, that I want to find ways to improve it. And getting criticism, I don't fear that, quite honestly. I think what I have seen, and I haven't seen the amended resolution, but one of the things that I just have feared that this has just been a personal vendetta, this whole commission. That it is not set forth for a good and honorable purpose. It stems from an individual who's been fighting our office for 20-plus years. And she is the moving piece behind this whole thing.
But if we take the people out, okay? So let's say, go back to Commissioner Lee's question, let's rephrase it. Let me rephrase my own question in amendment to his. Would you be open to doing this? And let's say we start from this point forward with this point forward. We don't look back. Let's say going forward, we want to improve because we're talking about a change. Again, taking out any personal, previous, anything, because let's assume they've all been handled. From every case that started as of today or currently ongoing, if we did something like that, would you not be open to that?
Can I just give one little caveat
Sure.
first? What, if you were inclined to go forward with this, I had hoped that we would be part of the discussion.
Well, yes. And I
Because here's what I see, is that I see a lot of allegations and what we want to do and what we're trying to correct and the problems are, and no one's coming to us and say, you know what, do you agree that these are the problems? Do you agree that these
And
are
I
the
agree,
issues?
that is a problem.
And so, you know what, I'm not opposed, obviously, Mr. Buman, he makes the final call. But me personally, I'm not opposed to having feedback and stuff like this. Whether it's, I'm not sure that this is the right tool or the right mechanism. But you know what, if there is a way that we can we can do a better job and we can instill more trust with the public, don't you think we would want to do that too?
Right, I would hope so. I just think, I've spent a lot of time in this, off time, even with Jeff and with others, and going through quite a bit of history with it. And I would hope, again, a couple of things that I do not want. We have to take it out of the personal, and we have to bring it into the process. Because if we have it in the personal, then it's always gonna get skewed in a wrong direction. We have to be looking forward, not looking back. And
Agreed.
And then I think we need to do it in a sense where all sides are working together, trying to find, again, back to a justice system that is not unjust. And get over some of the perceptions, public perceptions of what they seem to be seeing and feeling. Now, there's always gonna be a certain amount of that. I don't know how you're gonna get past it.
We're not going to, yeah.
You're not gonna get to 100%
Right.
where everyone agrees on this. That's not gonna be. But if we can get to a point of a certain amount of understanding with some checks and balances that feel comfortable for all involved, and we can just say, well, we agree, but we don't totally agree, but we agree we're at least in a process that is workable, that's where I'd like to see us get to.
Yeah. The only thing that I would like to throw in, and if this continues to go forward and we are part of this discussion, I am concerned about your role with regards to paying out money.
Oh, that's a concern of ours too.
No,
Don't think it's
and
not.
the thing that you know what, we are a very litigious society.
Yeah.
The courts are set up for that.
Right.
And you know what, in my capacity and with the county, there have been a couple of cases where I've prosecuted and, you know, they have sued me personally and the county and stuff like that. And those cases were dismissed where the courts have said, you know what, we know what the rules are. We look at all the precedents. And we are able to make a determine whether or not this is a good claim. And so I think that that is the right form for that,
I think that,
personally.
I can't speak for all of us, but I think we're on the same page with that, in the sense that when it comes down to actual paying, it's gonna be really hard for the commission to say, we're gonna put out money just on our decision on it. We'll usually wanna have some sort of direction when it comes to a court process.
Thank you for your time. Okay.
All right. I think we're at the end, aren't we? Except for our closed meetings. We will now, well, thank you for being here. Thank you. Are there any other public comments other than the items that we have addressed already? If there's anything else? Okay, seeing none, we'll move into our public.
Don't forget
into
to
our
harass
private.
Lisa Nilsson, it's her birthday today. Hey, I didn't tell him how old you are. She said if you tell her happy birthday, she'll buy you lunch.
Oh, so just so you know, I'm thinking to do this down, so I haven't even read it.
I came to the, no. This got dropped